All right, welcome everyone to the May 21st meeting of the Glendale Housing Authority. Let's have roll call, please.
Housing Authority members Ajinian,
Here.
Asaterian,
Here.
Brotman, Farpetian,
Here.
Najarian,
Here.
Parazian,
Here.
Chair Kasakian.
Here, thank you, and may we have your report.
Yes, the agenda for the May 21st, 2024 regular meeting of the Glendale Housing Authority was posted on May 16th, 2024 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Great, thank you. The next item on the agenda is approval of minutes for the meeting of May 7th, 2024.
I'll move the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Authority Member Asatrian and seconded by Parazian. May we have roll call, please?
Authority members Ajinian,
Yes.
Asaterian,
Yes.
Brotman, Farpetian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Parazian,
Yes.
Chair Kasakian.
Thank you, and let the record reflect that Authority Member Brotman has joined us in chambers. Next item is oral communications. Are there any cards or calls?
We do not have any cards or callers.
Okay, with nothing on the business agenda for this Housing Authority meeting, are there any authority member or staff comments? Okay, yes.
No staff comment.
No staff comments? All right, well, before we proceed, I'd like to make a few comments. I know that we have now reduced the number of Housing Authority meetings that we have from weekly to having them once a month. I think that we've had a few issues to come up at the Housing Authority, and at a time when we are facing housing shortages, housing crisis. It's in the news every day. In fact, there was just an article in the LA Times just a few days ago about this. I think it's important that we at least have some information provided to this body and its members and those who will be following it on issues pertaining to housing, starting from the city. So I'd like to ask my colleagues if they would support the idea of having regular reports from staff on items such as, and I just came up with a few, and I'm open to suggestions from anyone who wishes to make them at this meeting or in the future, but a request to have a presentation on the implementation of ADUs in Glendale. I'd like to know and have a survey of how many of them are being rented out to people who perhaps are not related to the individuals who built the ADUs, because the ADUs were supposed to be this kind of Band-Aid for the housing crisis that we have. We certainly have had a lot of ADU applications. I'm sure it would be important, and we've covered some of this during other presentations, but I think it warrants to have these discussions at the Housing Authority. Perhaps a report on the status of short-term rentals. We know that the city has very strict guidelines that prevent homes from being rented out for short-term rentals. I don't want to specifically name companies' names per se, but despite our restrictions on that, we receive reports from neighborhoods that there are still individuals and properties that are violating these ordinances. And generally, just status reports on housing projects in the city that have been already approved. We have a number of affordable housing projects. I think it would be a good idea to have updates on those, where they stand, what is coming down the pipeline, as well as what our neighboring cities are doing now that we have this Tri-City fund that was allocated from the state. We heard last week that Burbank is already using some of the funds for affordable housing projects. So those are some of the suggestions I have. If any of my colleagues have suggestions or ideas, or if they would second, one of my colleagues would second that idea, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, and I would just say some of the topics we might want to have in the evening if they're really of general interest. More people are going to be paying attention. And the other thing I'd say is maybe if staff has a list of things maybe scheduled out over the course of the year to share it with us, because we might have other suggestions of things to add.
I think for some of the items, Authority Member Brotman, thank you. It is good to have those evening discussions. The only problem and concern I have is that during the evening we have folks who come here on other items as well, and I want these to be akin to a study session where we can do some deeper dive, we can have some longer presentations, and perhaps go the full hour to hear answers to our questions. I know there's a lot of questions that always come up. Some of them we've heard about before, but with the makeup of a new council and with viewers that tune in and tune out of local government, it bears perhaps repeating to find out, okay, well, how does Section 8 work? How do voucher transfers work? How do the different housing, affordable housing programs work? Because I get asked those questions all the times, and I'm certainly not an expert, but if we have those on the record, we can direct people to it yearly. Yes.
I
Vice Chair
understand
Junior.
that the downsizing of these meetings are imminent, but I think reports are contrary, very on the positive side. We need those reports as much as possible.
All right. Sure. Yes, yes, Member Garpetian.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. So reports on affordable housing, the way that Section 8 process, works, or ADUs and how many of them, because ADUs, I don't know, we'll let staff take care of that because people don't have to disclose who they lease the properties to. But in general, would you like to have those reports in an open meeting, like for housing authority meetings, and bring it to the
Yeah. Yes, I would.
authority?
My preference would be for these conversations to happen openly, so people have access to that information. They can view it. They can participate if they choose to. As far as the ADU discussion, sure, people don't have to necessarily disclose who they're renting it to, but we can find out perhaps whether our processes have helped them, have made it easier or more difficult for the construction, and what their necessarily future plans are. Does a person who built an ADU wish to build another one or an additional one? Obviously, people are not limited with just having one on their property anymore. So those types of, I think, issues do warrant a better understanding from everyone here. So when we make policies about housing moving forward, we get a full picture as to what's happening in our city.
Okay. Thank you.
There are no other comments. And again, please feel free to either email me or staff with your suggestions on these items. I welcome them. A couple of years ago, also a number of years ago when I was Housing Authority Chair, one of the things that we did was a housing summit to kind of bring different academics and individuals and counterparts from neighboring cities to find out what each of us were doing, something I'd like us to eventually do before the year is up. So with that, since there is no new business, is there a motion to, I'm sorry.
Chair Kasakian, there seems to be a phone call coming in. Would you like to?
Sure, we
Take
can
that call.
entertain it. Go ahead. Okay. Hello?
Yes. Good afternoon, Chair Kazakian. This is Fernando Roldan from Glendale. One of the things I'd like to ask the mayor and the city council to do, when having new grants or so, this is something that I told many times the program director and also Ms. Paula Devine before she retired, is that I'd like to make sure that we don't forget about us persons with disabilities or seniors who need more accessible apartments and all stuff. Especially some of us who are working class people, in other words, middle class, because sometimes, being in a wheelchair and some of us who are working can't always afford what we need. So I do ask strongly that when you get this new sources of revenue, please don't forget about us, people with disabilities and seniors. Thank you for your time.
Right. Thank you very much. Appreciate the call, and certainly yet another topic we could look into in terms of housing for the disabled in Glendale. With that, if there's no other issues or anything anyone would like to bring up, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
I'll move to adjourn.
Okay, moved by Authority Member Asatryan
Second.
and seconded by Authority Member Garpetian. We stand adjourned at 1:10 p.m. Thank you very much.
We're on. All right, welcome to the May 21st special meeting of the Glendale City Council. Call to order at 1:11. May we have a roll call?
Yes, council members Brotman,
Here.
Garpetian,
Here.
Kasakian,
Here.
Najarian,
Here.
Mayor Asatryan.
Here. May we have your report?
Yes, the agenda for the Tuesday, May 21st, 2024 special public meeting of the City Council was posted on May 16th, 2024 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
And what's next?
Next is the one and only item, which is finance regarding study session number 4, follow-up items and internal service departments.
Great. Mr. Glanian?
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor Asatryan, members of City Council. This afternoon is our budget study session number 4, where we're going to cover follow-up items, wrap up, a 5-year budget forecast. So the agenda is going to agenda is going to cover year-over-year budget comparisons as requested, fiscal year 24-25 proposed budget revisions, the general fund 5-year forecast, central support department presentations, and as I mentioned, lastly, follow-up items, and we'll open it up to questions. We're going to have multiple folks from staff making presentation, starting with Jason Bradford, our Director of Finance and IT.
Thank you, Mr. Galanian. Good afternoon, Mayor Asatryan, members of the council. I will start the presentation by covering some year-over-year budget comparisons, some changes that were noted at the last session. So I will run through those that were mentioned at the last study session. First, I will start with the fire department. They show a total budget increase of $7.6 million. Most of that increase is in the general fund, comprised of increases in salary and benefits. As you recall, all of our labor agreements came due this June 30th. They expire, so this will be a consistent theme across budget changes across the organization. Some of the other changes included funding for their paramedic reimbursement program, offset by a decrease in fleet charges in the general fund. They had capital projects funding increase, a net increase of $500,000 for the remodel of several fire stations. Verdugo Communications Fire Dispatch has an increase of $1.5 million. That's all capital outlay and replacement, highlighted by the CAD system upgrade or replacement. And and that takes me to police. They had a net increase of $4.7 million. Yes, I'm sorry, I apologize, I lost my place in my notes, and that increase is mainly comprised of $4.8 million in salary and benefits, and then the balance is M&O costs of the increase in the general fund. They do have a $300,000 increase in their helicopter fund due to increased maintenance. They do have a decrease in their asset forfeiture fund. They budgeted in 23-24 for the mobile command post. That is going tonight, I do believe, before the council. And then I did mention this in a prior session. They did have decrease in their wireless communication funds, or often referred to as their radio shop. It is less capital purchases. They did a fairly significant upgrade on radios in 23-24. Moving on to the transit fund for public works. This is all special revenue funds. None of this is in the general fund. The $9.3 million increase is attributable to two funds. The first is a $2.9 million increase in the parking fund. Increases are attributable to, again, salary and benefits, contractual services, and an increase of $1 million in capital projects. The other notable increase is in the Major R fund, the Major R local return. Most of this increase is attributable to one project, $5 million for the parking deck electrification for the Beeline facility. This is actually split funded with the balance coming from a Metro grant. And the rest of the increase is a project for the CNG fuel station equipment. Moving on to infrastructure, again, Public Works, total increase of 13.2 million. General fund increase of 1.2 million, mainly salary and benefits, an increase in building maintenance and IT costs. And then this is the balance of the funding for the aforementioned parking deck electrification for the Beeline facility, 17.1 million. These increases are offset by lower funding in their CIP fund, primarily gas tax, is a net decrease of $5 million.
Mr. Bradford, I have a question on I don't know if you have these in front of you, but for both transit and infrastructure, do you have any numbers on how much of this budget is going to new buses?
I do not have that information at my fingertips. Oh, we are doing.
If I can ask Shay Eccleston or Daniel Hernandez to respond to that question.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the City Council. Unfortunately, we don't have that information, but we can look it up and report back before the end of the meeting.
The reason I ask this is I think I'm still waiting for us to have that conversation about routes and the type of transportation vehicles we have. I've raised this time and again about, empty buses running up and down our streets. I'm interested in, before making additional investments, for us to actually look at our different options, maybe downsizing them so they're not creating traffic, there's more routes and so forth. And so I would like to know from this fund how much of that is invested in actual sized new buses.
So for the next fiscal year, right now we haven't allocated any funding. What was previously approved was part of this allocation for this fiscal year. So we're not budgeting anything for the next fiscal year, but we do have a plan in terms of what the outlay will be in future years.
Okay. Can I get the details from this previous year?
And Mayor Satrian, the RFP has been issued for the analysis that you had asked for. So in the near future, we'll bring a report back to council.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on to quality of life for parks and community services and parks and recreation. They had an increase in the general fund of 1.5 million. Again, mainly comprised of increases in salary and benefits, general supplies, utilities, and other related M&O costs. For their capital improvement projects, they had an increase of $1 million in funding relative to last year.
Mr. Bradford, we're having a hard time hearing you. If you can speak into the
I
microphone.
apologize. I will speak into the microphone. So as I was saying, for Parks and Recreation, they had an increase of $1 million in their capital improvement projects relative to last year. And then their workforce development had a significant increase in their funding allocation of about $1.9 million. The rest of the increase in that fund is towards salary and benefits. And moving on to the quality of life in the library, had a total net increase of $1 million. In the general fund, the increase is, again, from salary and benefits, utilities, and IT costs. There was an increase of $500,000 in the library fund towards salary and benefits and maintenance and operation costs. There was a decrease in CIP funding. Last year was $100,000 funded in CIP and no funding this year in their capital improvement. And lastly, they had a decrease in their development impact fee of $400,000 relative to last year. Moving on to housing for community development. This is essentially the Housing Assistance Fund, Section 8. The decrease was primarily in contractual services for roughly $1 million, so again, a little less funding. And then the last one, decrease in quality of life funding for CDD at a net decrease of $3.3 million. That is comprised of several things. First, there's an increase in the Air Quality Improvement Fund. Mr. Calvert touched on this last week in his presentations, increase for funding to improve employee mobility, I do believe. And then the decrease in the general fund to $3.4 million is really two things. A two pieces. In the 23-24 budget, there was one-time funding being set aside for community development. The first being $2 million for economic development, and this was set aside for future projects. This will be carried over into future budget years and not rebudgeted. The second was an allocation of roughly $2 million for their housing rental subsidy program, and that is not going to be rebudgeted into future years. That is winding down. All told, there was $4.4 million in one-time programming in the 23-24 budget. That decrease is then offset by an increase in general fund operations in community development of about $1 million.
Can you say that last part again?
Yeah, so that decrease in the one-time funding was offset by increases in the community development operations budget in the general fund by about $1 million. That was split amongst all their various activities in the general fund. Increase of $1 million. Some of it is in salary and benefits. Some of it is increased funding for the Alex Theater, increased IT costs, and other contractual services in the community development general fund budget.
I have a quick question.
I have a lot of questions when it comes to community development and economic development. Do you want to take those now, or do you want to just hold them till the end?
As it pertains to the budget, I would say go ahead and ask them. Mr. Calvert and his staff are here to respond.
Okay. Mr. Calvert? I know we've spoken about this time and again, and we asked for a report during the last session as well about if you need additional staffing to ensure that we're reducing the time for permits for both home renovations and project as well as small business support. Can you speak to that? Because I feel like we've been having this conversation for the last year and a half. I recognize that you have put in place and we voted on code changes that are supposed to make things easier. But what I would like is to know where we're at now, and what support you need if we're trying to say, if something's taking 30 days and we want it down to 15 days, or if it's 60 days and we want it down to 30 days, what resources do you need?
My apologies, Mayor. I mistook your question. I thought it was related to what Mr. Bradford had shown as far as budget reduction and increases were concerned. Actually, as part of our presentation later on, we'll be talking about staffing per council's request.
Okay?
But if you like, Mr. Calvert
I
can.
already asked the question. He's up here, if you don't mind.
Mayor, council members, what I would say is that I would hold off on making, for us at least, decision to add staff or reduce staff. I think that right now you have adopted a number of changes. We would like to see that go forward before we choose or decide on how many staff members we should add to certain divisions. Right now, I think it would be a little bit arbitrary. So we see how these changes work, and then from there we can come back with a report and I think better decide how many people we need to add to the staff.
How long do you need for that?
I think we've discussed about 6 months.
Okay. And then as part of the permitting, what process are you guys putting in place with the other departments, like Glendale Water and Power and Fire? We hear it all the time. I think when we get to the meat of it, I have some questions for Mr. Young about what he's implementing to make sure that people aren't waiting 3-4 months. But as part of the discussion, when you had brought forth the idea of an enterprise fund, we did talk about bringing people over that are maybe operating in silos now. But I just don't know what to say to our businesses and residents anymore. So I'm just looking for solutions and looking to help each one of you to get to a better place.
I would say that a number of those are in process, whether it's moving people or finding better ways to kind of work between departments. That is in process now. We're already implementing a number of strategies to kind of improve those timelines. There are more on the way, though. This is something that will take a little bit of time, though.
So within the 6-month period, you'll be able to give us a report back. That also includes how you guys are changing things
Yes.
with Glendale Water, Power and Fire
Yes.
as well? Okay. And then at that time, Mr. Galanian, would we have an opportunity to revisit the budget to provide? How would that work?
Mayor Asatryan, at any given time when we come forward with a report or an ask that requires appropriation, then yes, council has the opportunity at that time to appropriate necessary funding.
I'll mark 6 months on my calendar, sir. Thank you.
Oh, I have a question. Yes, very high-level question. So fire and police, our safety, percentage of the general fund this year versus last year?
Councilmember Robin, members of the council, for this year, they're about 65% of the budget. Last year's allocation, we can look up and provide that.
Yeah. I'd like to see year over year, what, this year and this coming budget year to see whether it's increasing as a percentage, or decreasing or staying the same. Thanks.
Their budget did increase, I can tell you that, but as relative to the general fund.
Yeah, relative to the general fund is what
We'll
I'd be
provide that
interested.
information.
Yeah. That's it.
Councilmember Brotman actually have the percentage. It's about 62% for the prior year. So for 23-24, 62% of total general fund, and then for 24-25, it'll be about 65%.
62 to 65. Okay, so good size increase. Okay.
Okay, the next part of the presentation, I need to discuss a couple of budget revisions to the proposed 24-25 budget that I presented last week. The first being in the GWP Electric Capital Fund, specifically the biogas project that council has previously approved. The total budget is $74.2 million, and we're estimating $43.9 million in the remaining project budget. Instead of re-budgeting that as part of our 24-25 budget, we are going to carry over the funds, just like we do with every other capital project. Once it's approved, we do the project. Until it's done, we do not continually bring them back for approval during budget adoption. So with that revision, the GWP electric budget will decrease $43.9 million for 24-25. The next revision, this is where I like to say accounting and budget cross. This is in the sewer fund for the lag works, the reclamation plant. We share in the maintenance costs. The city of LA should bill us annually for our share. Unfortunately, we have not been billed since fiscal year 2021. What LA has told us is they don't have time, they're short-staffed, et cetera, et cetera. However, even though we haven't been billed, we've been properly accruing the expense and the liability each year. And since we've accrued it and recognized it, we only need to budget the current year expense in 24-25. We don't need to budget the payment in arrears. So the sewer fund budget will decrease $11.4 million since we already have the funds set aside. Okay, now I will go on and just briefly touch on the 5-year forecast. This is what was shown in the first study session with just the numbers are the same, but we have highlighted a couple things. First, the GWP transfer into the general fund is highlighted, which I'll speak to in another minute in another slide. And the second thing is, just as by way of reminder, the vacancy savings that we rely on to help balance the general fund is broken out. It's roughly $8 million a year. It's roughly 60 positions. And this is our forecast. For 24-25, we would rely on use of fund balance to balance the general fund at 6.9 million, and this is the forecast that was shown in the first study session. On to the GW transfer. This was one of the items that balancing strategies that we have not really discussed with the council. However, by way of background, back in 11-12, the electric transfer was above 13%, and it was lowered each year till we got to 10%, and it's been held constant at 10% since, I believe, 15-16. It did go down to 9% one year in 2021 due to the pandemic. The forecast that I just showed included the transfer, assumed the transfer at less than 10%. We just recently got some information from our consultant has confirmed that the transfer can remain at 10% without impacting rates. So what that means is If we transfer 10%, which what we've been doing since fiscal year 15, 16, it's raises the amount of transfer coming into the general fund. So we not only show a balanced budget for 24, 25, but we show a small surplus as the transfer is 10% and added another 7.5 million in resources in 24, 25. And then that adds into the out years another 10 to 11 million dollars per year in the out years in the forecast. The only other thing we changed on this forecast is because of that, and if we did it at 10% historically, we wouldn't need to dip into the 115 trust until 27, 28. Again, while this picture is improved, again, the caveat, we still have vacancies in there that we're relying on to balance the budget.
I have a question. If I could. I just want to clarify this. So you're saying we went down to 9% and we're still at 9%. The original budget that you showed us was at 9%, and now you're saying if we increase by 1%, we're going from 21.5 to 29?
I apologize for the confusion. Let me clarify that. We've been constant at 10% through fiscal year 22, 23. The 9% was just a 1 year during the COVID year.
10%.
So it was a much lower number actually in our forecast. It started at around 6.7% and then peaked at some point around 7.5%. So the differences you're seeing is the difference of what we had in the 5-year forecast. That's the information we had at the time, and it was roughly 6.7%. So the difference you're seeing is the difference between 6 and 10.
Wait, I'm sorry, run through this again. The 6.7%, I'm not sure where we're getting that.
So that is in our forecast for 24, 25. That's the percentage. We've held the transfer constant at 21.5 million in fiscal year 24, 25, and that represents about 6.7% of their operating revenue.
And why was it so low?
That is the information we were provided by our consultant at the time, and then when we clarified with it, we understood that the cost of service analysis was actually done at 10%.
So, Councilman Brotman, it appears that there was a disconnect or miscommunication or lack of communication from the consultant and the budget team.
But our policy has been 10%.
Correct.
That is correct.
And so the number that was in there, we thought was the 10% number, and now we found out, lo and behold, that really was only 6.7%.
That is correct.
Okay, and now, I can't
If I could state it another way, so the number that had been put into the cost of service analysis for the rate plan that the council adopted last year had this relatively flat number for the transfer. And so in the process of having this discussion between our office, finance staff, and city manager's office and the consultant, we learned that he had actually computed the rates with the 10% transfer. So when we learned that, that's when the adjustment that's reflected in this new forecast. So it was always in there. It's just there was a summary sheet that we looked at that had a flatter number, and that's the number that we thought we were working with as finance staff was looking at the forecast.
Okay, so what you have in this revised is, where's the revised? Okay. What you have in the revised is now based on 10% going out based on our forecast of.
That is correct.
Okay, and then with that, that means that this year we're not actually we're adding to the fund balance.
That is correct.
As opposed to drawing it down by 6.9 million.
That is correct.
But as Mr. Bradford mentioned, though, we're using $8 million in vacancy savings.
Which we have been using. I mean, that's not new.
Right.
Can you speak to that a little more?
Go ahead. So in the general fund, again, vacancies do fluctuate. We currently have roughly 120 vacant positions. Based on historical averages, we realize vacancy savings of about $8 million per year.
Mayor Asturian, maybe I can answer your question more directly. If you look at the one line item that says projected vacancy savings, 8 million. If we were to fill any of those positions within that $8 million of projected savings, the use of fund balance, the third from the bottom of 700,000, would get more and more and more. So what we would actually be doing is putting us into the negative. In other words, we have 120 vacant positions that are being used to plug our existing budget gap. If we fill any of the positions, we actually start unplugging the gap.
If I could continue.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. You okay? That vacancy, that's been a pretty steady level of vacancies over the years, right?
It has.
And our plans for this year so far, unless we change anything, we can do all the things we've been talking about doing and still remain at that level of vacancies. Okay. So there's nothing unusual about that level of vacancies. There's, as you've told us before, there's kind of this structural level of vacancies that is kind of always there because people leave and it takes time to replace them and that kind of thing. There's nothing that, but back to the GWP transfer, I mean, it's kind of a shocker. I mean, look at, so now when we're looking at this 5-year forecast, whereas we thought we would be at, 17.7 on our reserve and we'd be underwater, right? Significantly underwater. Just this one thing is showing that we get through the 5 years still right in the middle of our range, right?
And I think that speaks to our level of dependence on that transfer.
Okay,
The
but,
consultant had calculated at the 10%, but the charts that they had published were for something less than that, and that's what we were using because we relied on that information.
And the 5-year forecast, Councilmember Brotman, as you know, predicated on a lot of estimates on revenues, right?
revenues and, yeah, the economy.
The economy, recession, that
I
could
understand.
change drastically, and MOUs that we have finally been able to complete that will come about in another 3 years with employee associations.
Right. But it's a, I mean, it's good. It's a good picture, but it's a very different picture than what we've been thinking.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a shot in the arm.
But maybe I'll bring this up later again, but, well, I'll bring it up later about a longer-term forecast. I'll bring that up at the end. Thanks.
The number of vacancies, was that common with other cities? Or, there's always this conversation that we're like using these vacancies to balance our budget. So just.
So two things, Mayor Asadrian. Is that an industry standard? We are slightly higher. We're at 13% currently. Our goal for next year is going to be at 10%. That's the given standard in the industry. To your point, if we were to fill all these vacancies, we will need to find $8 million somewhere, which will come out of the fund balance, right? Is it doable? Absolutely. But realistically, even if we had all the resources, we will not be able to fill all these vacancies all within a given year. As soon as we hire some people, some folks leave, retire, go to other agencies. So it's a revolving door, but our goal is to stay at 10%.
I mean, I'm waiting for us to have the HR report to kind of learn about the processes and stuff, but, I think we have talked about this concept of doing more with less, burns out staff.
Yeah, we don't do that anymore.
And, I don't think we're ever going to get to 100% filled vacancies. I understand people come and go, but how we improve our HR processes to speed up the hiring is preferred, at least for me. Did you have a question?
Yes. So,
I had a request to speak in, Madam Mayor.
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't. There's nothing listed for me. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You want to go first?
Oh, you're still on Housing Authority. That's why you're
Oh.
not seeing it. You got to go
ahead.
to,
Go ahead, sir.
So,
yeah.
I mean, frankly, it's a little disturbing, carrying on what Mr. Brotman said, that we believe that we've budgeted the proper amount for the transfer and then realize that we are off $7 to $8 million. I think that's a big deal. I think that's a big mistake. whether it was due to miscommunication. There's a lot of numbers flying around. I get that, but that's a larger ticket item where we're going through with a fine-tooth comb in many of our budget discussions, peeling off positions or scaling back programs, really is something that we should be much more careful about. Was it Wildan that did this mistake?
No, Councilman Najarian, it wasn't well done, but we will deal internally with this error or failure in communication. It wasn't a mathematical error. It was just transcribing what they put in the rates and what was communicated to the finance team.
I mean, can you imagine if this mistake went the other way?
Yeah, exactly.
We'd be,
Exactly.
up in arms.
Absolutely.
But I'm not happy there was a mistake, but to the extent that the mistake was in our favor.
It was in the right
I think
direction.
it does give us some breathing room, but please, we have to be a little more careful on some of these, especially some of these larger ticket items. And just for everyone's edification, our charter says we can transfer up to how much of our GWP revenues?
25%.
Right.
Yeah.
And the people voted on that twice, but we as a council have set the policy to limit it to 10%.
Up to 10%, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Garbetian?
Yes, thank you. Since I have you here on page 7, you mentioned that biogas renewable project was budgeted for 74 million. Now there is a remaining budget of 43 million. So we're saving $43 million, or is costing us $43 million?
No, that is the remaining budget of the project. The total project cost is $74 million, and there's really two ways to deal with the remaining budget. Both are correct. You can rebudget what you think is at the end of the year and just rebudget and roll it into the annual budget process, or you can treat it as a carryover, which is how we consistently treat our capital projects. Once council approves it, we just carry over the funds. So it doesn't increase the cost. It's not a savings. All the funding is still set aside to fund the project. It's just a matter of that the project has already been budgeted for, so there's no need to rebudget those dollars.
What it does do by doing it the way that we're recommending is maintain a budget that doesn't fluctuate significantly from year to year because you're rebudgeting the project. You're just carrying it over. So whatever was previously approved in the previous year just gets carried over until the project's complete, as opposed to showing these fluctuations.
Thank you.
Leave it at that.
So,
Could I ask a follow-up to that?
Can Mr. Garbetian?
Yeah,
Are you
just
okay
on
with
that,
Okay.
just on that point, so before we go on to the next one. So just to clarify, the reason we're carrying it over, does that mean the project is going more slowly than we thought? Does that mean the project is not costing more than we thought, correct?
Councilmember Brahman, no, I don't believe so. I don't believe there's any delays in the projects. It's just some of these projects do cross fiscal years.
That's it. So
And that's really
this
what
is
it's a function of.
expected. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, that's all.
sure.
Thank you.
Of course. So the last item on that page, that $11.4 million, it was reduced 11.4 million from what amount?
So that is reduced from, when I showed the sewer fund budget last session.
Last session, that's why I don't remember
Yes,
that.
yes. So I'm trying to do the quick math. But last session, the sewer fund budget was $11.4 higher. So we've reduced it from last budget I showed last week.
Okay. So pages 9 and 11, I just want to understand the differences quickly, so make sure I want to understand it right. Our total resources, which is our revenues basically, is estimated to be 318 million, and our total appropriations, which is our cost, is 325 million. Am I correct? So therefore, we have $6.9 million deficit that year. And if we continue with $21 million transfer, it will end up being $19.8 million deficit in 28-29.
That is
Right?
correct.
And if we jump to 29 million to $33 million transfer, that deficit in 28-29 will be 8.3 million. Am I correct? So the GWP transfer comes from surplus fund. How do we calculate, when you say 25%, is it 25% of the total revenue of the GWP, or it's 25% of the surplus fund?
So that is the percentage of their operating revenue. So it is their residential and commercial revenue.
So it's from their gross revenues?
Correct.
And the reason that the 10% can be $33 million, is it because of the increases that we had on the rates? We have 2 or 3 increases coming, correct?
So that is correct. As the rates were raised, if we held the transfer 10%, with higher revenues coming in, it would increase the transfer if we held it at 10%.
And that's included in this?
That is included on the revised 5-year forecast. That is correct.
That's page 11.
Correct.
The revised one. So ending, but our reserves pretty much stays the same. It's 30% basically in 28, 29. And this year it will be 38%.
Correct.
Without any additional appropriation.
I understood.
Or revenue streams?
Or revenue streams.
Or revenue streams. Okay, I have some questions on some of the transit fund, but I'll wait until the end so we can finish the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to show just a quick recap of the proposed 24-25 budget with those 3 changes. The biogas, the sewer fund, and then the transfer, it all was in the enterprise fund category. So that is now decreased from last session from 591.9 million to 544.1 million. Our total proposed 24-25 budget is $1.204 billion. An increase of about 2.7% from last adopted budget.
All right, my turn? All right, thank you, Mr. Bradford. So the next few slides, we're going to cover the staffing, additional staffing that council has asked for during the previous budget study session, as well as over the last fiscal year. But before we move on to those slides, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to make some comments. It's an indisputable fact that we need additional police officers in our traffic bureau as well as patrol. But quite frankly, we have a need for additional staffing in every single department in the city. As some of you know, upon the Great Recession, we cut back our staffing by 20 to 25%, depending on the department. And we haven't even come close to restoring the number that we had cut back. However, in the last couple of years or so, thanks to this council, with your approval, we've been able to add some bodies, some head counts that has gone a long way to help with the operation of various departments. As it was noted, we have currently 120 vacancies out of 942 positions in the general fund. That represents 13% of our workforce. And as I noted, our goal for next year is to reduce the number of vacancies somewhere around 10%. That seems to be industry standard. And as Mr. Bradford mentioned a couple of times, we utilize $8 million in vacancy savings to help balance our annual budget. All that said, I do fully appreciate council's desire for putting in effort and be responsive to communities' questions and needs. For example, reducing permit processing timelines, more traffic enforcement, more code compliance, inspection, etc. But I want us to be strategic and methodical in our approach so that we're not just throwing bodies at a situation that may not always equate to improved service. And sometimes it does, I admit it, but not always. Just adding bodies doesn't really culminate in, most definitely not in operational efficiency. That was one of City Council's main priorities, as well as fiscal sustainability. So as you know, adding positions will add to cost. We'll need more appropriation, to say the least. And as you saw, the budget forecast, although much better than what we saw 2-3 weeks ago, there is still a chance that we will be in the red. Hence, that's my reasoning to approach this issue in a measured and strategic way. Hence, I have asked the department heads when they do have vacancies, as you can see on the left side column on the current, almost every single department has vacancies. They've been asked to provide plans before replacing or starting recruitment for a vacant position that could include restructuring, use of technology, reassignment of duties, consolidation, etc. And based on that plan, then we can move forward with recruitments as necessary. And as I noted to Mayor Asaturian, when these plans are approved and we have it in place, if we need to appropriate additional funds, we'll come in front of council at any given time and we'll ask for additional appropriation. Currently, we have vacancies in police and fires. These are primarily non-sworn position. We have 2 in finance, 1 in city treasurer, 1 in city attorney, 1 in city clerk with another addition to city clerk's office, several, more than 40 vacancies in GWP, obviously community development and planning and building and safety, project management positions in public works, community service and parks as a budget liaison, and my office management services. Again, we have multiple vacancies, and we have put these positions on hold pending the approval of the budget, and like I said, pending submittal of plans that we can move forward with. Now, as for the future, per council's request, and we'll seek direction. You have asked for additional staffing, sworn officers, police officers in the police department, additional planners and code enforcement inspectors and community development. There's the pending potential of a separate transportation department or a division that we will schedule briefings with council and then bring it forward and seek direction. With all these vacancies, and if we add additional personnel to departments, then our human resources department will need to enhance their staffing. They need to beef up to be able to handle all these recruitments. Communications and community outreach has been a point of concern for this council and the mayor, and we need to create a plan that I will talk about to be able to have a holistic approach to this issue. And then you have asked for previously for a prosecution unit, and as well as city assistance to or staffing for city council.
Will you be speaking to the communications and community outreach today? Okay, all right.
The previous study session, you had asked Chief Sid what it would take to bring the sworn personnel from 248 positions to 300. This is the back of the napkin kind of estimation. The total cost is approximately $15.1 million. Will include 45 police officers, 5 sergeants, and 2 lieutenants for a total of 52 positions. Again, you see the estimated cost and the totals. It's not just a mere fact that we go ahead and hire personnel, but we need equipment, we need vehicles, we need fleet, we need IT supports, and this is just a sampling of ancillary needs that comes with addition of personnel. Go ahead.
If I may on this,
Yes.
Is there a lengthier kind of report or breakdown for this that we can get?
Thank you for leading me to that. As I noted, I have asked for plans from every department and every department head. So Chief Sid has already started working a report with a more detailed breakdown of what it entails and the timing Preliminary, he's looking at a multi-year plan as opposed to, obviously, it's unrealistic for us to be able to add 52 positions in 1 year, considering we already have 120 vacancies. So he's working on a multi-year, a multi-phase plan that he will bring forward for council's consideration in the near future.
One of the things I do want us to consider, as development projects are coming to council, I think one of the things that needs to be included in those reports is a section from public safety. If we're increasing housing, if we're increasing commercial space, whatever it may be, that has an impact on our public safety needs. And so I would love to see that. For example, I know that the Sears project has like, what, 800 units there?
680.
Or 600, whatever it may be, right? Like, especially like project, maybe they're, above 50 units. There should be something from fire and police noting, if we're approving this in addition to the other things that we have, how are we keeping up with public safety with that approval?
Point taken.
So basically, a development impact fees that serves public safety.
I think it needs to include, for example, if we are, I don't know, 1,000 per officer, 5,000, 10,000 per officer, whatever it may be. If we're adding, say, 600 units, or we're adding another 100 units, what does that also call for at the same time with fire and police? So we can also, I think, look at ways I would love to see what other cities are doing when we are approving larger development projects, for them to also help assist. Maybe they're the ones that are purchasing that fire truck we need, or whatever it may be. So I know other cities do that, and I'd like for us to take a look at that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mayor Sardian. If our benchmarking is based on per capita, then as the capita grows, then our workforce should grow, or especially in public safety.
But we should see that at the same time as we're approving projects, right? So
We'll include that in the fiscal impact.
Question.
yes.
Still on this proposal, or maybe we won't call it a proposal, this analysis. Supposal. Just if you could just remind us, we talked about this last time, but what would this imply as far as sworn officers per capita? What is the 248? I know we're very low, or like half of some of our neighboring cities. The 300 would, and I also know it's not apples for apples. You can't just compare across the board. But what would this take us to?
I'm going to invite Chief Sid to respond to that question.
Afternoon, Mayor and council members. In regards to the ratio, assuming that we went up to 300 sworn, that would put us at 1.5 officers per 1,000 resident. As a point of comparison, that would put us on par with the city of Burbank, where they currently are today. Still slightly behind Pasadena, who's at 1.7. City of Los Angeles is usually around 2.3 or 2.4, just as a guide. Today, assuming we got up to the 248 that we're currently allocated, that's about 1.2.
1.2, okay. Thank you.
Again, Mayor and Council, I'm not seeking direction on this particular item. As I mentioned, let's give an opportunity for Chief Sid to finish his report. We'll bring it back with options and a request for appropriation as needed, and then Council can make a decision as to how many a number of additional sworn personnel and in what time frame. Okay, next. The other staffing item that council has brought up and had a brief conversation around it last go around, and I promised I will include it in this year's budget. It's staffing assistance for council. On this table, you see 4 different cities. One, obviously, city of Pasadena has the distinct difference that they have council districts. Hence, they have 1 to 2 positions, title of executive assistant to the mayor, city council, And you see the salary range, and these positions report to the mayor directly. They also have 7 positions that are assigned to each individual city council member in that district. City of San Jose has a council community relations or customer service specialist. This is at a manager level, reports directly to the mayor. City of Chino has a council liaison, reports directly to the city manager. And City of Irvine, they call them chief of staff for council member. They have 5 positions. This is 1 per council member, and they report directly to that respective council. Next. Just for some reference and point of conversation, discussion, these are 3 titles that we have come up with: Assistant to City Council, Senior Assistant to City Council, Executive Assistant to City Council. There are options for an hourly position, part-time, in that range, as well as a full-time, depending on the title and position. The salary of those respective positions obviously vary. And on this item, I would seek council's direction so we can incorporate it into budget.
Councilmember Kasakian?
So on this item, I noticed that the cities that we had selected, so I guess the question I have is, how did we select San Jose, Chino, and Irvine as comparative cities?
Councilmember Kasakian, I believe these were a handful of cities that do have assistance, direct assistance to council and mayor. We had also, staff had checked with City of Carson and 1 other city.
And I mean, the reason I'm bringing that up is because Carson, I know, is probably a city that's more comparable to us than San Jose, which is one of the largest cities in the United States with a population over 1 million. I'd like to know, for instance, what that is. And then also in terms of the salary ranges, which I think are set pretty high, my question would be, is that based on just simply a survey of these 4 cities, or was it just a figure that was, explain to me the rationale between part-time hourly that starts at $40,000 to $52,000 a year, and then full-time, which is $98,000 to $120,000 a year, just for assistance to city council.
Sure. So the salary ranges that you see are comparable to similar positions that we have currently on the books. So we do have executive assistant, but it's not. Actually, we do have executive assistant to city council, so this will be an additional position at that salary range.
Okay, because I mean, I think that for the type of assistance and staffing that is needed for someone to help with correspondence, who can attend and take notes and report back and generally provide assistance to a council member. I mean, if you were to just pay someone even, someone $30,000 to $35,000 or $30 to $35 an hour would be significantly less than what that full-time salary is. I don't see it as something comparative to what a full-time employee would be, given that this would be someone that would be at will, just like Pasadena has, and would be directly answerable to the council.
So if we get, Councilmember Kasakian, if we get direction and some additional clarification as to the needs of council members, then again, we'll bring a report back with options and roles and responsibilities and the rates, and council then can settle on one of those options.
There's something
So
you wanted to share?
at this point, I'm looking for direction to bring a report back.
I think, the way these numbers are presented, I think dampens anyone's or suppresses anyone's appetite for actually moving forward with something like this, because I personally think that having someone on at an hourly rate determined by, initially part-time to see how it would work out for council members would be my preferred option, to have someone who can be available at the city at times when we're not available at the city, to be able to coordinate meetings and our schedules more than what the individual or individuals right now who try to do it for all 5 of us at once would be my preference. I would cap it at something like, at most, $40,000 per council member, as they deem necessary. They could use either up all of it or none of it, depending on a council person's choosing.
Councilmember Kasakian, just to clarify, these costs are fully burdened rates, so they include salaries and benefits.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that wasn't made clear. On the other ones, in the previous page, when we're looking at police, it said, for instance, there was, I mean, that I think was a little bit more clear versus this one, where it just makes it appear as though it's just salary. So at least that's somewhat helpful.
Yeah, that's almost 50% in benefits.
Okay, so 50% of that is going to be benefits,
A
potentially.
little more for our city, about
Okay,
about
well, I
60
mean, I
to
think that's good
70, yeah.
for the public to know.
Yeah.
Because I think, like, you know, having someone work at a minimum wage rate initially would be my preference, maybe slightly above that. Like, I envision someone who's either going to school part-time or even just fresh out of college, who wants to gain experience and exposure and wants to work in this type of capacity. It would be almost initially, I envision this as like a paid internship type position, not something that, or for someone who's perhaps retired and is looking for something to stay engaged with the community with, as I've seen in Pasadena.
So I would actually want it to start off as an hourly. I'd like to test that. I would want to see something around $30 to $35 an hour, with a cap. I do think it needs to be 1 per council member. And they would, for me, it would be like reporting directly to the council member and not to the city manager.
Yes, we've taken note of that, Mayor Asatryan, Councilmember Kasakian. If the direction is to have 1 assistant per council member, space may be challenging in our office, so we'll have to figure that out. But again, we'll wait for the final direction.
Councilmember Brotman had comments and then.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if this is just a matter of agendizing something to come back, we can work on details then. So I support that, agendizing it to come back. From my own perspective, I'd probably be looking more at an internship program, you know, something probably along the lines of what Councilmember Kasakian is talking about, somebody that's a student, or it could be anybody, but, you know, most likely a student. And it would be kind of a basic minimum wage, and considered as a learning opportunity for that person, and that's kind of where I would want to go. But if it's just being agendized, we can have that conversation later.
Yeah, and you'll have an opportunity to finalize the job description before we go out and recruit for the positions.
And I do think that although, you know, with Pasadena's salary range, if that is fully loaded, perhaps makes more sense. But in terms of how Pasadena runs their program, they've had it for a while. It has worked in many areas, and speaking both to staff and to the elected officials, everyone seems to be happy with the way it functions in terms of spacing. They do have an area that's like a bullpen for the individuals. They have desks at City Hall. Some of them prefer to work remotely from part of the time, or they're out in the community. So I think that there's some flexibility, and in terms of how they ultimately answer, I think that there is, you know, I know that whenever this topic comes up, there is some discomfort between amongst the individuals who've, you know, whether it's the city attorney's office, city manager's office. I know that this is completely new in terms of concept, but again, in talking to Pasadena, they've figured out ways to even deal with the HR issues. So I think that in communicating with them and talking to their city clerk's office who's involved in the establishment of this, and they have an appointed clerk versus elected clerk, and Mark Chomsky, I think we can get some clearer direction as to how their program has evolved, and also ask them what has worked well for them and what could be improved.
Councilmember Garabedian.
Yes, thank you. I mean, are we agendizing this to come back for discussion? Is that the direction that you want? Because I'm not ready to make a decision today to say if I need an assistant or I don't need an assistant, how many days, how many hours a week or a month, or what the salary should be. Are we agendizing this for, it doesn't have to be part of this year's budget, am I correct?
It doesn't have, well, depending on the timing. It was my hope to get direction today so that we'll bring back a report as to the roles and responsibilities, the salary, the number of positions with options. But if you like to agendize it for, to make the decision at a later time, that's council's prerogative too. We can do that both.
I believe so, because this is the first time I'm hearing about this issue, and
Their agenda, well, it's already on the part of the agenda, we're discussing it now.
if we have it for, 5 hours, $35 an hour, 4 days a week, or 22 days a month, or what have you, it's about $40,000 to $46,000 in salaries, and that doesn't include the benefits. So if it's really part-time, or 2-3 hours a day, and then includes the benefits that comes up again to $40,000 or $50,000, that's a different story. But what are, I'm gonna mention them by first name, because Mari and Vlad and everyone else in our office, because every time I need something, I call them and they take care of it, or if I have anything, I call you or I call the assistant city manager. I just want to understand if you have a report back as to what are the roles, what will be the roles of this assistants? Is it that I've seen them that they're council members or mayors mostly in other cities, that they come with their assistants and they take pictures, they take notes or what have you. I just want to understand what is the role of an assistant that we're looking for. Not that I'm for it or against it, I just want to, we need to understand what we're, what we're trying to do.
Ms. Mansourian and Mr. Solomonian, they are both executive assistants, but not just solely to city council. They handle my affairs, Mr. Taktalian's, the entire city manager's administrative work as well. If the direction would be to hire assistants to city council, they will solely work on what the council's needs and desires are with the community. But we will bring a report back with more details and options.
If I may recommend, it looks like there is some sort of consensus on wanting this, but what it looks like is, up for discussion, and that we're gonna talk about that. What I would want to do is have a space holder in the budget for this year. I don't want to delay it to next year, because this is a conversation we had last year, and then bring the report back, and we can decide on the details together of what that looks like, and whether it's hourly, whether it's whatever it may be, whether it's an internship fee, whatever it may be. So, but I do want us to have some sort of safe space saver.
Yeah, I just want to be very clear. My comments today is not an indication of that I'm for this or not. I heard this for the first time. I know maybe there was a discussion last year. If council wants to move forward based on that, it's fine. But I just want to be very clear. I don't have an opinion as to if I'm for it or not. Personally, I don't have a need for an assistant, but I'm willing to listen to the report and my colleagues and see what the needs are and how these assistants are going to, serve us and serve the city. But in general, so far, I have not seen a need for an assistant. That's why it's kind of a new item for me. But I'm willing to, listen to the report when it comes back.
We'll bring the report back.
Carry on.
All right. Next is the topic of our very own prosecution unit. Mr. Garcia's helped me with this text. The process, the procedure is that the city charter, Article 8, city attorneys authorized to prosecute criminal cases for violations of the charter and city ordinances. Expanding this authority to state misdemeanors requires one of the following two actions. City attorney must obtain the district attorney's consent to prosecute state misdemeanors as required by the government code, and the city, or the city charter must be amended to expand the city attorney's authority and responsibilities.
One more.
So the city attorney has come up, generated this cost estimate, 6 positions within the unit, 1 principal assistant city attorney, 1 assistant city attorney, 2 deputy city attorneys, and 2 senior office specialists at a fully loaded total cost of $1.2 million per year. And I'm pretty sure Mr. Garcia would be happy to respond to your questions.
Question. Is this something we can just do, or do we need the district attorney to agree to it?
Councilman Robin, so as noted, we either need the district attorney's consent, which the current district attorney's on record not granting it to other cities that have made the request, or we can amend our charter to grant ourselves this authority. So, and by say we, you know, the council action to place it on the ballot, and then the voters approve it, and then we can establish it. You know, obviously, that might not be something that the city council will be able to do until 2026, depending on what you decide to do with the November election.
Okay, so I didn't realize that. So even without the district attorney's approval, we could do this?
Correct.
If we make a charter? Interesting, okay.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
So is that how the city of Pasadena currently is able to do it? They have it in their charter?
That's my understanding.
Okay. It would be good to get clarification on that. And then my question would be, this is something that would be of interest to put to voters, especially I think that, you know, empowering ourselves to be able to handle some of these prosecutorial tasks for these issues not only sends a clear message to the community as to where we stand on public safety, but also if at a later time, even though if it's in our charter, things shift or change county-wise with whether it's the DA's office and the policies, would we be unable to defer these back to the DA?
Not necessarily. You would, at that point, though, a couple of things. Obviously, if you had ramped up staff, that would be a challenge. But the second point, you would obviously have to then, at that point, confer with the district attorney to see whether or not that's something they would be willing to take back as a function.
Because, I mean, as it stands right now, it's not like the DA's office is really doing much of following through with many of these cases, correct?
Certainly with respect to the quality of life misdemeanors that we don't have, you know, similar provisions in our code. A lot of drug possession, a lot of, you know, even resisting arrest are things that they will not prosecute unless it's a second offense. So you're right, there are certain things that they are not actively prosecuting unless it's a repeat offense. And I would note, just this is the cost, the estimated cost based on us comparing our caseload compared to what Burbank and Pasadena, what their caseloads are and the staffing levels. But there are other models too. So if you'd still need a charter amendment or DA's consent, but for example, some cities have explored contracting out that function. And some cities have with a private entity, and some cities have explored contracting it out with another city. So for example, the city of Redondo Beach, the city of Manhattan Beach and Hermosa Beach contract with the Redondo Beach City Attorney's Office to do their prosecution.
Interesting. I would be open to any and all options, even if that means, I don't know if contracting with Pasadena even would be a possibility if they already do it, but it would be something I would be interested in pursuing. Thank you.
Councilmember Najarian?
Yeah, I think it's a bigger discussion than just looking at the budget, because if you're going to develop your own prosecution team led by the city attorney, that city attorney has to have prosecutorial independence, which means that he would probably, in my opinion, have to be an elected city attorney. Otherwise, you'd have the city council telling them, prosecute that guy, don't prosecute that guy. You'd be hearing it from, several others, and that would destroy, your right, your duty, that wouldn't be your right, it'd be your duty to determine which cases should be prosecuted and which shouldn't. So I think that needs to be part of our discussion also. I'm much like the LA city attorney that's elected and has a certain bit of independence, like the district attorney. LA County has certain independence, and if voters are unhappy with that, then they answer in the at the polling booth. Whereas it could become more of a political, indirectly political, by us telling the city attorney, you know what? Don't prosecute those bicyclists that run through the stop signs, or whatever. They can run through stop signs now. I know. But don't prosecute those drivers in their own neighborhoods because they're the ones that are more worried. So, I mean, you could get those weird sort of directions from council, and it would be important. If we're going to create this, we're going to need to have a city attorney that is independent from the other political influences that are out there. So, like I said, that's not just a budget issue, but it's a sort of a political and management issue too, as to how we want to go. And I have an open mind on it. I don't have a point one way or the other on this.
Can I just briefly address that, Madam Mayor? So I agree, it is a significant policy decision, not just a significant budget decision. But I would note that we already exercise that prosecutorial independence when we prosecute violations of our municipal code. And I would, both Pasadena and Burbank, they are appointed city attorneys with a prosecutorial unit, and they do so exercising independence. And so it's incumbent upon, if you have an appointed city attorney and you give them that function, to make sure you're hiring a city attorney who exercises that independence regardless of which way the political winds blow.
Yeah, I know, just to answer, I know you personally have caught a lot of heat on some of those code violations, some of the restaurants that were operating improperly, some, the homes that weren't, every month or so there's a hot subject as to why aren't you prosecuting? And you say, well, it's our intention to work with the applicant or work with the homeowner, the destruction of the home, the noise, all these other things. So whichever way we do it, and I don't like that part where council comes to you and says, you prosecute, speed it up, or don't prosecute, give them a break. I don't think that's proper.
Neither do I.
But, so we should try, if we go forward with this, we need to try and fine tune that so that you're not under pressure. Whoever is there is not under pressure by council members or anyone else.
Like I said, it's important policy questions.
Councilmember Garpetian.
Yes, a couple of quick questions. How many cities they use this process? That they have their own department to prosecute or what have you?
Hold on, I think I have that.
And also, another question is, what kind of cases are we planning on prosecuting? Like, is it the ones that they were lowered from felony to misdemeanor, or?
Correct.
or-
Any case that's submitted for filing for misdemeanor. So in the cities that have them, they, any misdemeanors that are submitted by their police departments are submitted to the city attorney's office. Oftentimes, you might have cases that are felonies, and then the DA either rejects them or won't prosecute them, and then at that point, they get referred to the city attorney's office to file.
We can prosecute.
And
So
then
we still refer them to the DA's office. If they are not prosecuted, then we can take over and do it in-house, basically.
Correct.
And do we have to have, I know that, I believe we have a holding cell in Glendale. Do we need to have a facility like that, or in full force to, sometimes they can't make bail and they have to stay in a facility? Do we still have that, and Is it up and running?
We do have a detention facility, and that I don't see that changing, the way that's operated, whether they make bail or they don't have to provide bail. That's still, that function doesn't change.
If I may, it seems like we're going into a discussion on a policy matter instead of just talking about it as a budget. It seems like there is desire to talk about this in general, so maybe we can just add it to a future agenda for us to discuss, but.
So the goal is to budget it today and then have a discussion in
No,
the
so
future?
I would say that provided what we have in our budget, this could be brought up as a discussion item, and then we can make a decision, and based off that, we can allocate funding if we choose to go in that direction.
Okay. I'm okay with that.
Councilmember Kasakian, did you still want to?
No, it was, I understand Councilmember Najarian's concerns. Obviously, he has more experience as an attorney in some areas. I just wanted to clarify that, no, I have never, ever called the city attorney asking him why they aren't prosecuting someone or why, I leave that up to the city attorney's office or the DA's office. I may ask questions as to what is our general policy on an issue, but I don't want the public to get the impression that any individual council member has that kind of authority or power to force the city attorney to do one thing or another, and that these are all professionals that work for the city. I think that when we speak in these terms, it starts raising people's eyebrows and maybe questioning, how the city operates. That has never been the case in as long as I can recall around City Hall. But also in terms of the elected city attorney's role versus appointed, I also wanted to point out, as City Attorney Garcia did, that other cities do have appointed city attorneys, and they do take on this role of prosecuting misdemeanors as they do in Burbank, as they do in Pasadena. And given the overall atmosphere and culture we have in Los Angeles County, it is something that I'd like to explore. Obviously, we can't budget for it today, given some of the options that were presented, but it's something where I would like us to consider all available options for us to be able to control what happens in our city and how we can send a clear message that this is a city where people have to follow the rules. Now, I will also say that there may be times when we may have a rule on the books, and council as a body with a majority open discussion can choose to have a stay on enforcement or prosecuting individuals until we clarify the issue. I don't know what, we can come up with a number of examples. I know that fences have been a topic of discussion here. Changing windows have been topics of discussion, et cetera. But that needs to be discussed openly and publicly, or noise, or whatever it may be. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Next item that City Council has been interested in was enhanced code enforcement. As you know, Council has adopted a number of new ordinances, including Mylar balloons, plastic takeout ban, gas-powered leaf blowers, and increased tree protection, as well as over the last few months or so, a year or so, street vending has been an issue that has required code enforcement. So the department is recommending 2 associate code compliance inspectors at a fully loaded cost of $118,000 annually. The focus, again, is going to be on education for the time being and not active enforcement. And Mr. Calvert is available to respond to your questions.
So I know we had some discussions on this in the past. I'm of the, at least for the time being, I'm of the mindset that you can take this money and you can help these industries transition into this space. If we're spending, I don't know, $236,000, then creating an incentive fund to help gardeners move into purchasing gas leaf blowers on top of what the state of California already has, whether it's working with our restaurants and eateries on the plastics bans. And I think that education and incentive programs are two very different things, right? And so you can either hire somebody that you're saying it is educating, but really it's under code enforcement, or you can take that money and invest it to help that industry transition. I also thought that at least the previous council, I believe code enforcement had received 1 vote during the last work plan and discussion, and that we were going to be coming from a place of helping our residents and small business owners versus hiring additional inspectors that are going to be going after people. And I think that these things need to be done in a chronological order. So you create the incentive program and do education at the same time, that then is followed by actual code enforcement when you've done your due diligence. I've time and again, especially with any of these items, talked about the lack of language access for folks. I'm going to continue repeating that over 53% of our residents are immigrants who are foreign-born, which means that if we are not doing thorough community outreach and education and making those programs available to them in their language, we're leaving out more than half our population. Mr. Carpetian, I know you have comments. And
Thank you. I think some of this can be done by enforcement, some has to be done by transition. I don't know if $200,000 or $180,000 would be a big help for transitioning, but I think it would be helpful. But I think we would need more funds to help the restaurants, for example, to transition from completely plastic, use to alternatives that are more environmental friendly. But when it comes to street vending, I've been hearing about it a lot, and therefore I started paying more attention when I see the vendors on the corners. Most of that one item could be strictly enforcement, because there is no, if they don't follow the rules, there is no way to help them to transition. Because when the law says you cannot block the sidewalk in residential neighborhoods, for example, and you set up shop right on the corner, and people stop at the red curb and to pick up or deliver or what have you, it becomes a huge nuisance. And also I mentioned the amplified music in front of other establishments. It's not so much the other restaurants, but other establishments, and which they don't want to hear. I know, architects and engineers and accountants that they have an office on Brand, and it faces Americana, and when they had this live music there, that music was there all day long. So I think some of these issues needs strict enforcement, but the rest is education and also helping into transition. I agree with you on that.
And if I may, I'm happy for us to invest even a larger amount for those incentive programs to be impactful. I do agree with you on the street vending, and even like the Mylar balloons, the tree protection, all those kinds of things. I get it. The others, I want to be able to help our residents move into that direction, right? Like so
the street vending is getting out of hand, and it's become an overnight business in many corners that is affecting the residents, the business owners, and the taxpayers, if you will. So something has to be done specifically on that item. But again, I think we are all on the same page, and as far as the enforcement and education and helping them to transition to what the city wants or what our laws basically demands from them. Thank you.
Councilmember Brotman?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I don't think these are mutually exclusive. In fact, they're complementary. I think we lead with education. We've always taken that approach. And I think with some of these new items, we are putting a lot more effort into education, especially the plastics and the leaf blowers. And that's good. We have to do that. I think with some of these, putting together incentive programs is also good and necessary, but I think you also have to have the enforcement ultimately. Otherwise, there are some who will not take these ordinances seriously and will not comply until they're at least given a warning, and we generally do give warnings first. So to have the people to be able to go out and give those warnings, which is a form of education in of itself for people that aren't necessarily paying much attention. I think it's important. So I think you need all three, and I wouldn't want to skimp on one or treat it as we have to choose one over the other.
Councilmember Kasakian?
Thank you. I think that, these items that were brought up by staff are certainly issues that are of concern to many, if not all of us on council. I think points have been well made by the previous speakers, my colleagues, but we can add to this list, and I think that $236,000 is a bargain for all the issues they can address. Shopping carts, we had, this city was one of the first, prior council was one of the first to pass a very, strong shopping cart ordinance, stray shopping cart ordinance with teeth, which has kind of fallen by the wayside. You see abandoned shopping carts around the city in various places. It would be something I'd like to see this enforcement unit pursue. Illegal dumping for another. We have certain hotspots in the city where as soon as the items have been picked up, someone else dumps something else at. And I think this is something that, staff, as they are straining to do more with less, as you said, Mayor, they don't have the resources or the time to necessarily address this, where an added pair of hands would help. And along with illegal dumping, I mean, we've seen graffiti reemerge. A lot of these things that in Glendale we would not have seen 10 years ago have reemerged, and I think it kind of puts a pall over a lot of things in terms of the quality of life and starts affecting the perceptions as to where we are. We certainly know that how hard our staff is working. We know in comparison to other cities how not well Glendale is run and how well things are maintained. But again, it's those little things that when they fall by the wayside, they draw more attention than sometimes they deserve. And certainly we've seen increases in these. So $236,000 is something I'd be willing to support if we need to do that to address these issues. Thank you.
So if that is the case, then would we have like a longer list of what these new staff members would be working on? Because again, I think in addition to what we talked about, the points that Councilmember Kasakian brought up are valid, and I would want, for example, code enforcement on those things. But again, at least for me, I'm not okay with going after our restaurants and gardeners until we actually help them transition.
Mayor Satrian, Member City Council, that if that's the case, again, we'll have to bring a report back. At minimum, if it's council desire to provide incentives to businesses and property owners, then we'll have to come back with a report on different options and the amounts, and who would be qualified, how would we apply it, who will manage it, things of that nature. We can do that. But I'm pretty sure, and Mr. Calvert can attest to this, if they had 2 additional code compliance inspectors, they would follow up on these miscellaneous issues. The illegal dumping, abandoned bulky item pickups, as you know, we have 4 private haulers whose responsibility is to pick up those abandoned items. But again, code enforcement folks can and report them and make sure to follow up with them. So these 2 inspectors can help out, again, with education on the other items and following up on street vending, shopping carts, graffiti, nuisances of that nature that impact the quality of life. Mr. Calvert, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Thank you, Mr. Galani. Mayor and council members, whether we're talking enforcement, incentives, education, it will require staffing no matter what. As Mr. Galani highlighted, if we do an incentive program, someone has to manage that. I don't think it would be wise to house that in a separate department. than the people who are actually enforcing at some point. We would need staff members. I think what we're talking about is a change in philosophical approach, and I think per the city manager, we come back with an agenda item later on and discuss what it is we incentivize, what we educate, and what we enforce on. But regardless, no matter what path you choose on those, additional staff will be needed to handle that capacity.
Yeah, I just see the title like code compliance inspector, right? And so I'm assuming that the person's gonna go.
And I think our general
inspect it.
residents probably think we're there to enforce and whatnot, but we've also already transitioned our approach now. We try to focus more on education and resolution to issues. We may call them enforcement, but they are beyond that, and it would include things like education or incentives.
Okay. I really am interested in helping create some incentive programs that are on top of anything that may exist on the state level. I was even thinking that for the gas-powered leaf blowers, if we can do an added incentive on top of what the state has, but also do something where they have to purchase it locally, then we get the sales tax, just kind of.
Yep, those are the
Thanks.
options that we can bring back.
Okay, Councilmember Brotman?
No, we can, I think I made my point. Yeah.
All right.
So if we can get direction, whether you want to move forward in adding these two associate inspectors.
You have the comments from all of us. Councilmember Najarian, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't. But the only caution I want to make is we're talking about bodies on one hand, and we're talking about incentives on another hand. So you're adding two costs together here. So let's make sure when we talk about this, we understand what the true cost is.
So if the direction from council is for these two bodies, we can include it in the budget. For the incentive program, we'll have to bring back the report. We really don't know what the amount is going to be.
Mr. Calvert, would you need two, given the discussion around incentive programs as well?
Mayor and council members, if we're going to move forward with any of those kind of programs, yes. If we're going to move forward with any additional ordinances at all in the future, yes, we would need those. We are at capacity at this point. We do continue to kind of add to that portfolio of things that we enforce. So if there are future considerations, they will be necessary, yes.
See, it's like when you use words like enforce, that's when I get
Education,
scared, right?
enforce, incentivize, maybe the three, whichever one you want to
Compliance.
choose.
If I may suggest, then, Mayor, why don't we combine the two into one singular report so that you have this big picture of how much the total cost is going to be, and you can pick and choose.
That'd be great. Yes, Councilmember Broughton.
Yeah, I think regardless of what we do, we're going to need more people, whatever we call it, because a lot of what we call enforcement, what you call code enforcement, is telling people what the right thing to do is. It's not actually giving fines. I know there have been cases where people have put artificial turf on city parkways, right? I don't think you've fined those people when you've gone out. You've told them what the city policy is. In most cases, they understand and they make the change. If they thumb their nose at us and you've gone out there 3 times, you want to be able to give a citation. That's the world we live in. So I think we need the code enforcement if we want any of our codes, if we're serious about our codes, if we're serious about the laws we pass, we need ultimately to have an enforcement capability that doesn't preclude us doing these other things, like the education and like, in particular instances, incentive programs. So I would ask that we do include the 2 heads now. We go forward with that because I think that's baseline. And that we come back and look specifically at what kind of programs might be needed for restaurants around plastics and for, that whole sector, that whole gardening sector for the conversion to electric leaf blowers and batteries. If that's acceptable to my colleagues, then I would like to do that.
I mean, the key word for me there is ultimately, Councilmember Brotman.
Ultimately,
You use the term ultimately, that we get to the code enforcement ultimately. So how are we building towards that? So are you recommending that it's going to be in chronological order?
I'm lost.
So for example, gas-powered leaf blowers.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it going to be, are you envisioning chronological order where there's an incentive program, then there's education at the same time, and then ultimately, at some point, we go out
Well,
and start
okay.
enforcing. So
We have incentive programs, we have education. Once the policy comes into effect in September, if there is reporting, because we're not doing active enforcement, if there's reporting, code enforcement will go out and inform the homeowner of the policy. I'm sure code enforcement will probably go out multiple times and will be reasonable about how it approaches this situation, because each one is going to be different. And if it comes down to issuing a citation, I think code enforcement doesn't do that until it feels like it's run out of options for compliance. That's generally the way I've seen you work in code enforcement. So I think we have the elements.
Councilmember Brotman, you are correct. We don't go and immediately issue a citation. We start with a notice of violation. If I may suggest this as part of a broader discussion that we would come back with, and this is something we have wanted to do for a while, is we come back and we ask the council what your priorities are in terms of enforcement, in terms of that level of, I don't want to use the word aggression, but how quickly we move forward with enforcing something and at what kind of scale. I think that fits very well in this discussion. That allows us to be able to establish whether we're offering incentives, education, or actually moving forward more aggressively to enforce those codes. That is something I would like to be able to bring back to the council and get your direction from, to understand what is a priority for you, and what are the things that we move forward with more quickly to address, and what are the things that we maybe take our time to educate and give an opportunity to resolve. I think that might be an appropriate means to address really kind of all of these situations, but I will say it will require more staff regardless.
all right. Maybe you can also include the incentive programs in that.
Yes, we would make it part of that, yeah.
Okay. But is there agreement then, we'll go ahead and add the bodies now? I mean, that's going to take time, but
Right.
budget for it and bring all these other questions back for us to develop a set of policies.
122 vacancies. Go ahead.
In
right.
general fund.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor and Council, to the next segment of this presentation, we are going to cover the central support departments or internal facing departments. General fund includes city attorney, city clerk, city treasurer, finance, human resources, and management services. Collectively, they account for almost $28 million, or 8.6% of the total proposed next fiscal year's general fund budget. Vast majority of this money is in salary and benefits, namely 75%. The other 25% is maintenance and operations. That includes contractual services, training, office supplies, rent, insurance, etc. There are also other funds that these group of departments manage. City and city attorney is the liability insurance fund. Human resources, it's the employee fringe benefits fund. Management services is the cable access fund. Mr. Bradford? You want me to cover that too? Right.
You're on a roll.
So this is the budget for our central service departments. As a comparison, 2023-24, our current year budget as adopted, and the next fiscal year, 24-25, proposed budget. And on the the far right column, you see the increase or decreases. City Attorney's Office, $2 million. City Clerk, $100,000. City Treasurer lowered by $100,000. Finance, $200,000. Human Resources, $1.9 million. And no change in Management Services proposed budget. With that, we'll start with finance, and Mr. Bradford will do the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Galanian. It is my pleasure to present the fiscal year 24-25 highlights for the Finance Department. As financial stewards of the city, we're responsible for maintaining our system of internal controls aimed at ensuring many things, including accurate and timely financial reporting, safeguarding of assets, and compliance with all applicable laws and regulations. We take a lot of pride to meet those objectives. To that end, we continually receive a clean bill of health on our financial statements. We fully comply with all generally accepted accounting principles, and this is a testament to the staff in the department. Our functions include what you would typically associate that a municipal finance department does, in that we process payroll, we do the budget, we do our financial statements, pay our bills, collect the bills via accounts receivable, and of course, procurement. Some of the highlights in our budget for the upcoming fiscal year do include the aforementioned financial external audit. We also do the single audit. We are required to do so by the Office of Management and Budget, and this is an audit of all the federal grants the city receives, such as CDBG, housing assistance, workforce development, etc. We also work with consultants and do a lot of compliance audits. We do compliance audits for all the major revenue sources in the general fund to ensure we are receiving what we should be receiving. That's sales tax, property tax, utility users tax, and the transient occupancy tax. And lastly, we do contract with an actuarial firm. They do a variety of analysis for us over the year, including our doing actuary analysis on our pension obligations and our retiree health savings plan. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the Finance Department.
Seeing none, we'll move to, surprise me, City Attorney's Office, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. So the City Attorney's Office, as you know, primarily operates with two divisions, and the primary focus of the Departmental Services Division is to provide advice and counsel to the council, the boards and commissions, and staff. We process throughout the year numerous legal services requests. We are in charge of drafting, reviewing, preparing ordinances, resolutions, motions, and then obviously we negotiate, draft, and review and revise contracts. One thing I forgot to leave, important bullet that I left out here is obviously this division handles the municipal code enforcement, as we were talking about earlier. So all the cases that are submitted to us, either by neighborhood services or building safety or police, that are violations of either our charter or municipal code, are processed through our department for prosecution, or at least trying to get compliance before we have to file a criminal action. With respect to the Litigation and Risk Management Division, this is the division that operates the liability fund, is in charge of both insurance procurement and the insurance renewal process, as well as giving insurance approvals for the various contracts and activities that the city departments operate on a daily, weekly, yearly basis. The city attorney's office is also the department that reviews and processes claims, legal claims that are filed before the city. These are claims that for violations of sidewalk hazards, those sorts of things. Someone is required to file a legal claim before they can file a lawsuit, and oftentimes we get those claims, we investigate them to determine whether or not it makes sense to try to resolve the claim before it turns into litigation. If it is meritorious and the amount claimed by the claimant is reasonable, we will try to negotiate a resolution prior to a lawsuit being filed. And then our office obviously handles a significant amount of our litigation in-house, both tort litigation, employment litigation, civil rights litigation, and a variety of writ litigation, challenging actions that might be taken by the city council, for example. So challenges to projects and those sorts of things. So those are the two divisions within our office. Those are the activities that we're working on. And obviously we are, as an internal service department, just like all the other internal services departments, we work to assist the staff in helping achieve the goals that the city council sets on an annual basis. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yes. How many employees, attorneys do we have in your office at this time?
We have 12 attorneys.
12?
Yeah. So And there's 2 litigators full-time. There's an attorney that oversees the litigation and risk management division, and the other attorneys advise the departments.
And the $2 million increase from this year to last year is due to?
Councilman Garpetti, that's mostly due to the, do you want to answer that? Okay. So that's due mostly to increase in the liability fund. 2 major components of that. So the increase to the liability fund this year will be about 1.7 million of that 2 million. Most of that is due to increased claims, anticipated claims payments. Again, just due to the nature of litigation in California, due to jury verdicts these days. We're seeing more claims and having to resolve them at a higher amount generally. The other big component of that is about $600,000 increase in insurance premiums. And obviously, it's been a while since you've been briefed on this, but we are seeing, as a municipal organization, and most cities are seeing, California are seeing 15% year-to-year increases in the cost of insurance, as well as higher deductibles. So that's what's reflected in that additional cost. The other additional costs have to do with increases to the cost allocation to the liability fund. So total, that's about 1.7 million. And the rest is increased cost allocation to the city attorney's office, increase in salaries and those sorts of things.
Okay. Yeah, the insurance issues, out of control. I mean, there are some homeowners that their insurances got canceled completely. Some, they just doubled and tripled for no apparent reason. They just got a letter that said, we're not renewing your insurance, and that's it. So, okay, thank you.
All right, next up is city clerk. We'll go to Dr. Abajian.
Okay. Good evening, good afternoon, Mayor Satrian and members of council. I'd like to go over some of the operations in my office that are standing operations. So it's what we have provided in the past and what we will continue providing in the upcoming fiscal year. Although we are an internal service department, we do directly serve the public. The clerk's office essentially serves as the city's 411. So our office receives multiple daily inquiries from the public, ranging from affordable housing resources and programs for the homeless to parks, facilities programs, assistance with filling out city forms, complaints about various operations and departments, and reasons for city street closures. We receive on average 12,000 calls a year. This does not include email inquiries and counter service. Staff often navigate complex public inquiries, de-escalate situations, advise the public on how to get the information they need, and redirect them to the department or individual that they need to contact. Addressing public inquiries takes a significant portion of all staff time. The next operation is public records requests. The clerk's office manages on average 1,500 to 1,700 public records requests a year. For this year, for the 2023-2024 fiscal year, the clerk's office has managed the intake, coordination, and delivery of approximately 1,500 public records to date. These requests range in complexity depending on the number of departments involved, the volume and nature of the documents, and the specifics of each request. The time required for staff to fulfill these requirements from the date of receipt to the final production varies depending on the complexity of the requests, and these requests do not include interdepartmental inquiries and council requests. Next is agenda management. The clerk's office oversees agenda management and minutes for City Council, Housing Authority, and the Commission on the Status of Women. Our office provides AMS administrative support to all departments throughout the process of posting, editing, and changing agenda items and staff reports. Our staff is tasked with the finalizing and posting of agendas per legal requirements and assembling agenda packets for council and staff. Depending on when all the staff reports are in, sometimes city clerk staff have to work nights and weekends to ensure compliance with the Brown Act. Additionally, our office also coordinates the intake, uploading, and distribution of presentation materials for all agenda items for the aforementioned meetings. The next area is City Council, Housing Authority, and Commission meeting support. The clerk assists the mayor and Housing Authority chair in running council and Housing Authority meetings and manages public comments. The clerk's office assists with coordinating proclamations, commendations, invocations, translations, interpreters, and public comment cards. And staff is responsible for managing the setup of the council chambers for the aforementioned meetings and closure afterwards. Additionally, city clerk staff manage the phone lines for public comments, not only for council meetings, but also for multiple commissions. Next are city records. The clerk's office oversees the keeping and management of city records. This includes reconciling council resolutions, certifying council documents, motions, and ordinances, and all other documents, and uploading, managing these documents in FileNet. The clerk's office manages the filing, retention, and digitization of hard records, oversees the implementation of records retention destruction schedule for all departments, and manages the off-site record storage facility at Iron Mountain. Next are boards and commissions. The clerk's office manages all appointments and vacancies on boards and commissions. This includes managing the boards and commissions website, posting vacancies, intaking applications for all commissions, distributing applications to council, onboarding and offboarding letters to and processes to commissioners, swearing in, and other related tasks. Next are elections. And elections, even though elections are every 2 years, municipal elections, there are other elections in between. There are general elections. And the clerk's office, in collaboration with the LA County Registrar Recorder County Clerk, coordinates and manages different portions of these elections. So our staff coordinate in collaboration with the county clerk's office and Glendale Public Works, set up polling sites that meet all legal and accessibility requirements and ensure ballot drop-off boxes are functional and accessible throughout the city. The clerk's office, in collaboration with LA County Registrar Recorder's office, promotes the calendar of events leading up to Election Day. Also, our office manages GlendaleVotes.org. Elections are promoted by our office. Our staff oversee the creation, translation, distribution of social media posts, PSAs for local television channels, local paper announcements, banners throughout the city, and utility bill inserts. Public inquiries, again, go through our office regarding elections. Any violations, code violations, go through our office. We inform code enforcement, the city attorney's office, FPPC, and other applicable overseeing bodies. And our staff also attend and table different community events to promote voter registration and engagement. And throughout the year, our staff meet with the LA County Registrar Recorder's Office and serve on committees so that they can provide input on the hiring, training of election workers, making election materials more accessible to community members with specific linguistic, cultural needs. Again, during municipal election years, we have the additional tasks of preparing candidate packets that meet all legal requirements. Our office also helps candidates file different paperwork, example, 410s, 460s, 470s, 501 forms, et cetera. Verify signature for qualification and manage the list of candidate forms. Also, during non-election years, we prepare for election years. So we review processes and procedures for the next election season. If the council were to vote on placing a ballot measure during the upcoming November election, this will be managed by our office. Next is the Commission on the Status of Women. We acquired the Commission on the Status of Women at the beginning of 2022. My office has the pleasure and honor of overseeing all operations of the commission. Clerk staff assists the chair of the commission in setting agendas for regular special commission meetings, research and write staff reports, publish agendas, coordinate legislative updates, and set up and run commission meetings and manage ad hoc committees. We also coordinate community events and community education and outreach efforts for CSW. This past year, we hosted 3 successful events, including the Purple Tie Awards, Glendale Women Today, and Women Helping Women. We anticipate that the commission will want similar programming for next year. Yeah. The clerk staff also coordinates the writing and publishing of educational materials, such as the most recent report on the status of women and girls in Glendale, and we also coordinate the translation and publishing of these reports. And we anticipate that the commission will produce similar reports in the coming year on different issues. For instance, there's interest in spearheading citywide initiative on human trafficking awareness campaign, which will be, again, something that my staff will have to work on. Additionally, our office has ceremonial and educational duties. We host and receive visits from members of the public, community organizations, and schools, and provide educational presentations on the operations of the clerk's office and also the city as a whole. For example, we hosted tours for the YWCA Camp Rosie participants during this past year, and we anticipate doing the same this year, and additionally visiting schools as we've done previously and make presentations on government, on local government. Also, in addition to all of these, our department helps and manages the following bids. Our office is responsible for coordinating and posting all bids in local papers, calendaring bids, intaking bids, overseeing formal bid openings, etc. 700 forms, lobbyist registration, refunds and claims for damages, codification, certificate of life, and residency, among other operations. And at this time, I'd be glad to take any questions that you have.
Councilmember Garpetian.
Yeah, a couple of quick questions. Speaking of elections, do we have the precinct maps? Because that shows the location of each precinct, because we used to have that. It was electronic, and you could click on that number, and it would tell you how many candidates and who got how many votes in any given precinct. Do we have that?
Go ahead, Mr. Ajamian, you can answer.
Madam Mayor and council members, Councilmember Vartan Garpetian, that's a good question. We do not have that. We have an interactive map that we do on Glendale Votes where you can type in your address and it tells you which precinct a certain, let's say, school board member or a college board member can actually go and vote.
Yeah, that's a different topic. As far as elections go, after elections, there was a map, electronic. All the precincts were on all over the map of Glendale, and you would want to go. You wanted to see, compare your votes to your, to other candidates. You would click on that precinct. It would tell you how many votes each candidate had, and that was very helpful in, analyzing where you did well, where you didn't do well, and also, in districting even, they use that to see candidates from North Glendale, did they get any votes from South Glendale when they had a candidate running in South Glendale, for example. So this was very interactive map, and it was very helpful to everyone. And people who wanted to do research in Glendale, it was very, very helpful. I just want to know, how can we get that back? Because
we can contact the LA County Register Recorder's Office, because the interactive map was with LA County Register Recorder's Office, and we'll try to link up with that and put it on our Glendale Votes.
I think we need to do that. Also, as far as the agenda management, you mentioned agenda management. Is it the council agenda management?
Yes, we manage the council agenda as well as housing authority and the agenda for the commission on the status of.
So if you recall, I mentioned the invocation process, and you mentioned that you don't have staff and you need more staff to be able to call a few people maybe once or twice a month and schedule with them so they will be part of the agenda. I would like to know, if not today, in the near future, how many staff your office has today versus 5-6 years ago, or versus a few years ago. Also, as far as the budget, how much is your budget compared to, 3 years ago, before COVID or what have you? So I know the budget goes up and down, but number of people working. You mentioned you're short 35% in staffing compared to, like, Mr. Kasakian, when he was running our the city clerk's office for 16 years, and it doesn't have to be today because it's not part of the budget, but since the report is here, I wanted to understand what the challenges are for every department.
Thank you, Mr. Harpetian, for that question. Currently, in addition to myself, we have 4 full-time staff members that take care of all of these operations. We are in the process of hiring one. We have a vacancy. We have another position that has been put on hold because of managed hirings. So that will greatly impact the amount of, or the depth of work that we can do in these different areas. And also, I know we have been in conversations with the CM's office and adding an additional staff member for a records manager position. So I think we need a records manager. That's
Right.
very much needed, but we also need admin assistance to help us address all of these operations and issues that we have on a regular basis.
But currently, how many employees do you have in your office?
I have 4 full-time employees, aside from myself.
Including you and Mr. Ajemian?
Including myself, it would be 5, yes.
Including you would be 5, okay?
I believe
Yes.
Mr. Bradford has a.
And I was just going to add, then they
I
had
have
one.
some
and then-
follow-up questions.
And then they had one vacant position, so total in the proposed budget of 6 FTEs. So it's
Just 6.
five filled and 1 vacancy.
So is there 5 or 4?
It's 5.
Currently, we're 5. We're in the process of hiring for another position, but we have essentially lost a position because when we acquired the Commission on the Status of Women, we already had 6 positions, and, you know, we had agreed to take that on with the additional staff members, so we had 7 staff members. And
Actually, so I do want to,
yeah,
I have the Women's Commission as one of the items that I did want to talk about, because that position used to be housed under city manager. And I recognize that it was brought over to your office to handle it. With do you have any idea of how many staff members there used to be? Because, I mean, you mentioned things like 12,000 calls a year and, you know, almost 2,000 requests, like public requests. Like, how are you handling all of this with 4 people?
well,
And when we say 4 people, I'm very thinking about the Women's Commission position, which is supposed to be half-time for, specifically just for the Women's Commission. It's not for all the other duties you guys had.
Thank you for that question, Mayor Asatrian. At the moment, we are just addressing the most pressing needs. So I think our staff members are, a lot of their time is spent meeting these legal requirements. And, you know, whatever it is, a lot of these positions, we used to have an elections admin assistant that just did elections, and we lost that staff member right before elections. So that position was basically absorbed by myself and Mr. Ajemian, and that included working on weekends and paying our other staff overtime to just get through the election.
Do you have any idea of how many staff the office had previously?
I know that.
Councilmember Satrian and Karapetian, yes. So the number of employees in city clerk's office has fluctuated between 6 and 7, but it's been around there going back to 2016, 17, looks like.
But 2017 is when the elections merged with the county, so.
I do have.
Wasn't it? Or 2020, like after was it 2020?
2020.
I think Mr. Tokhtalian has a clarification.
I don't know when it was merged. I'll let them answer. Either one of you answer that first.
Madam Mayor, I do believe Martin and Chapman, when we used them last, was in 2017.
Yeah, 2019,
We
2019
merged
we merged with the county.
Right.
Did you have more, were there more like hourly employees or part-time employees in that office?
I can answer that.
Here, you can answer.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to hear from Mr. Kasakian. And also,
There was about 6 employees. There were a couple of part-time. So our finance department is correct in saying that it fluctuated between those numbers. But based on the information I've heard today, there are more full-time employees in the city clerk's division today than there were during the time when I had the privilege of serving as city clerk.
ask you a
There
question?
were,
There
hold
are
on,
more, there are more full-time employees today than there were when I was, between whether it's 2015 all the way to 2020 from the numbers that I just heard. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, either of you, Mr. Takhtalian, but there are more full-time employees today than there were when I was there. At least on paper. I don't know if those are fully staffed up, but that is,
are they,
You handled the elections at that time as well, in 2015 and 17? Your office
so
handled the
when,
elections,
yes,
right?
well, the city clerk's office was responsible for helping coordinate and running elections, but when we say that, keep in mind that Martin and Chapman was hired as a consultant to help run it. And at various times, there would be additional staff that would be brought in. Some of it would be retired staff from the city clerk's office. But those functions have since become obsolete because of the consolidation of the elections. And I'm sure there are other, as the city clerk stated, perhaps other functions that have come up. Recruitment of staff, working and coordinating with the county. I haven't been there to observe how the city clerk's office operates during the election, so it would be far from it for me to comment on that. And again, I apologize for speaking out of turn, but since I do have the floor, I just want to mention that to answer your question, Mr. Garpetian, the map that showed what results were by precinct was prepared by the city clerk's office. It was prepared by our office at the time and in coordination with Public Works using GIS staff who were adept at layering that information on top of the map. But I don't know if that information is tabulated the same way because precincts have become somewhat obsolete as well. It would be hard, the way the ballots are collected now, the way it's an all-mail ballot election, et cetera. I would ask the staff to contact the county to find out how that information was tabulated. Before, as you know, when the vote-by-mail ballots came, they were set aside according to the addresses, according to the precinct, and that's how they were tabulated. That's how you know who received how many votes per precinct.
Right. The county has that information. We have the list of all the precincts with all the votes that every council member had in every precinct, and also it's separated by vote by mail or in person or what have you. But it doesn't tell you what the addresses of those precincts are. You have to go one by one and find it online. So if those information is transferred on a map on precincts, it will be very helpful. I mean, that was a great system that you had at that time, and it was very helpful. So the information is out there. It just have to be put together and place it on a map.
so, I'm kind of confused on the staffing because I'm hearing different numbers. Councilmember Kasakian said they had 6, and then I guess some seasonal or elections-related employees plus a contractor during elections, which would make sense that, I think some of that actually still needs to be done for the education part because, just because LA County has taken over doesn't mean that they're paying attention to what we're doing. And I do remember, there was coordination way back when with the city, LA County's clerk's office for voter registration and so forth. So it's beyond just overseeing the actual elections that are taking place. But so how many do we have? How many staff were? And so I'm counting, if you're saying 4, but half of one of those is the Commission on the Status of Women. Are they actually putting in 50% of the work?
Not at the moment, because we need the staff time for doing everything else, because we are short-staffed, and we've, again, once we hire, we're still going to be short-staffed. We're still going to have less staffing, even if we're at full capacity. So, yeah, but
So
at
were
the
positions
moment,
cut, or you're having a hard time hiring?
no, one position was put on hold as part of the whole managed hiring policy of the city. And so we weren't able to recruit for that position. We haven't been able to at the moment. And we are in the process of hiring for one of the vacancies at the moment, but the other one has been held.
Okay, and then you guys mentioned a records manager that's separate from?
Yes, correct.
Mayor Asatryan, member City Council, as I noted earlier, because of the budgetary situation we're in, I had put 18 positions on hold. So it's not just in City Clerk's office. I listed some of them. And depending on the outcome of this budget, we'll revisit it. I've asked the City Clerk, as I have asked every other department head, to provide a plan that how they plan on continuing with the operation with or without these vacancies. We also have agreed on adding a position of records manager in the next fiscal year that is of critical need. So that's what the process is. My understanding, there are 5 full-time employees, including the city clerk, plus that vacancy, correct?
Okay. So.
And I'm sorry, I apologize. I have to add that there are savings within that budget, as it's with most of our departments. And if the city clerk has an urgent need to hire hourly staff, she can go ahead and proceed with that using those savings. And that's been offered up.
Okay, and then you're collecting this data from each of the departments, and then you're going to circle back with them and then come back to us? Okay. I think while we are on the city clerks, I know that there's an item later tonight for us to talk about the Women's Commission, but I would like to see some additional funding from our budget be placed into specifically programming for the Women's Commission. I think that's going to be part of a discussion that we have tonight for the commission itself, but aside from what the commission has the powers to do or not to do, I think it speaks volumes of our values when we're allocating only one part-time staffer and no additional funding for programming for women and girls. I would really like to see some additional dollars be applied to that. And perhaps as part of the request I'll be making later today is, to come back with a plan of not just like what used to be, but really looking at, I want us to be a model city in this space. I want to look at what some of the leading cities are doing across the state in supporting women and girls, and what kind of funding that would require. We have a healthy budget. One of my colleagues just mentioned it's only $256,000 for code enforcement. Yet we're looking at roughly, a $70,000 investment just for a staffer, but nothing in addition to that when it comes to women and girls. And so I would personally like to really see us through. I know we had some great programming in the past. Even I was at the YWCA event this last week for the Hearts of Excellence luncheon. I know that was something that we used to do with the YWCA. I know there used to be training. There used to be, I think, some classes for women and girls. And then Camp Rosie was part of that. But again, I'm not just looking to go back to how things were, but how we can lead the way in this space.
I had some comments.
Sure.
I mean, the clerk's office is in a flux. They used to do a licensing, if I'm not mistaken. Pet licensing, dog licensing, cat licensing, permits. I'm not sure if the film permits were ever handled out of there. But it's in a state of flux at this point. And I do think we should be equitable when we talk about providing services and opportunities to our residents, but it shouldn't only be women and girls. So at any point, if anyone wants to discuss having a men's commission that addresses some of the issues men have, early heart attack, early stroke, shorter life expectancy, higher suicide rates, higher alcoholism, higher drug use, I'm ready to have that discussion as well, because we need to be fair about this. I think it's great work that the Commission of Status of Women does, but I know a lot of boys, men, senior men, that have a lot of issues too. Not the same issues, but they have their own issues that are related to their gender. So how's that?
Well, I would support that. I mean, for further discussion, I have 3 girls, and they went through the Camp Rosies and everything. It's a great program. I think we have to improve it and add to it, but I think we need to pay some attention to men as well, especially the young men.
So actually,
future
I was going to wait until
This evening.
well, this evening, but also to respond back. Actually, some of the programming that the Women's Commission used to be targeted towards men, because when we talk about healthy relationships, when we talk about domestic violence issues, when we talk about all of those things, some of that is actually geared towards boys. That it takes society as a whole. It's not just a women's issue or things that impact women, also impact men. And so, yes. All right.
No, I mean, I think we can discuss this when it comes back. If it comes back, we put it on the 6 o'clock. Maybe Mr.
Right.
Najarian can offer your suggestion.
City
at the
manager told me
evening.
not to die on this hill, so I'm not sure if I'm going to raise it again, but I'll think about it.
Well, statistics still show that there's a huge pay gap between men and women. When we look at our actual women's report that was produced, I have serious concerns about the staggering number when it comes to Armenian women that were discovered this year, which make up roughly 50% of our population. And so I think there is a lot of work that needs to be done in that space, and that space specifically. Councilmember Kasakian.
Thank you. I don't want to, I know we have a lot ahead of us this evening and still to go, but Clerk Abajian, you mentioned about staff staying late to finish packets. So my question is twofold. One, the first part of it is to the city manager's office. At one point, different departments would charge, especially for internal services, the responsible department. For instance, if ISD was fixing computers for the clerk's office, it would be charged to the clerk's office. And that is still a standard practice across the organization?
Yes, sir.
Okay, excellent. So my question would be to Clerk Abajian, and essentially it goes to everyone in the organization. When city clerk staff has to stay later to get a report out to the public and to the council, are we tracking which department is the department that has resulted in said late report? And is the time that is being spent that is extra beyond what the staff is doing being charged to that department? I mean, there needs to be, if not a carrot, perhaps a stick, so departments look at if they have a streak of late reports saying, okay, we got to do something different to get our reports in time, because we're constantly under the wire for this. So that's my question and my suggestion as well.
Councilmember Kasakian, we do not keep track of which department is responsible for the late publishing of an agenda and et cetera. But that's a great idea. I think we should, and we will take that recommendation.
That would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
For you and for the rest of staff.
I appreciate
So we can
that.
get those things out in time. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Next is the city treasurer, Mr. Manukian.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members. If I had known that I was going to make a presentation today, I would have worn a brighter shirt, but the city treasurer's office handles all the banking relationship for the city, as well as the cash management, the reconciliation for the accounts, tracking of all the payments and receipts on a daily basis. We also handle the payment card industry compliance issues in coordination with finance, IT, and internal audit, and we also manage the city's portfolio. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer it. I think I'm the longest presentation today, so.
I actually have one item that I was going to bring up at the end as a recommendation, but I think since you're here, that would be helpful as well. I was going to recommend that we look into establishing a first-time homebuyers program. I actually looked up last night, City of Los Angeles, Huntington Park, and a lot of cities throughout California have it, where the city, you know, with a cap of, say, I think LA was $161,000, helps with the down payment and closing. And then the shared appreciation is with the city because the city is helping with that. I was also thinking about how that can also potentially be something, if it's structured differently, to be revenue generating based on the return on investments, for example, that your office gets. And if it's still much lower than what a bank would offer, but in addition, it's, you know, it's assistance that the city's providing for us to be able to explore something like that for our residents or people that want to be our residents.
Or my kids, yes.
Or your kids.
They tell me all the time, how are we going to afford a home in Glendale? So I think a first-time home buyer is a great program. We used to have one.
You move out and they move in. That's that's the first.
They're planning on it. They're planning on it.
Are they all going to live together?
But we used to have a program for some home buyer. Of course, that's not within the purview of the city treasurer's office. But
Right. But so I think the reason I posed that question was, you know, when we talk about return on investments, what percentage are we talking about? So if we were having that other conversation, for us to also gauge if it's something we just, you know, City of LA and Huntington Park don't have a like loan interest with it. But I'm also want to see if there's opportunities for us to either come out even, because we're basically taking out that fund from an investment possibly, or.
I think in the past, the way it worked, the city had an equity participation in the home buyer. So when the individual bought the home, we helped them with the down payment, and as a percentage, we took the profit if they sold the home after a number of years. So that could be a return. But as far as what the percentage return, I would not be able to tell you at this time.
Okay. I think as we're going through the budget, if there, you know, I don't know if there's interest from my colleagues in having that larger discussion on this, but it is something I would love to bring to our city. I think when we talk about affordable housing, it's not just rents. It's how we help people become homeowners. And so I don't know what that would look like with our finances, with our investments and stuff, but.
Yeah, Mayor Satrian will have to bring community development will have to bring a report back with those details.
And considering where the home prices are now,
Right.
that.
I mean, I was looking at it, for example, City of Los Angeles was like, the cap was $161,000 for down payment and closing costs. And then I think the appreciation value had to be by like year 15. You know, if the home wasn't sold by then, and then it was 80% AMI was the income level, right? And so it's not like you're just assisting anybody, and there was also a cap of how much the home can be worth. I think it was like $1 million and some, whereas Huntington Park, for example, was like $800,000-900,000, and clearly because of the market, housing market in each of these spaces. So, just something for us to look at. I think it would be worthwhile to bring back. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next up is our Human Resources Department. Ms. Adams out of the office on vacation, but Naira Akopian, our HR Compliance and Operations Manager, will do the presentation, ably assisted by Mania Hunanyan.
Good afternoon, Mayor Satarian and members of the council. In the last fiscal year, the Human Resource Department prepared a strategic plan for the next 5 years. Ensuring that our plan aligns with Council's priority of operational efficiency, we created the 5 highlighted items identified here. To maintain competitive compensation and benefits, with Council's support, we successfully negotiated contracts with several bargaining groups and are working on ratification with a few more. These contracts included cost of living adjustments to keep salaries competitive and have aligned medical out-of-pocket costs across most contracts. We are also working with our broker of record to conduct a comprehensive classification and compensation analysis to see where the city stands in the labor market. To sustain a supportive employee experience, our department revamped and relaunched the Service Award Program, where we recognize employees who have achieved milestone anniversaries within the city. We hosted our first employee appreciation event last year to say thank you to our employees for their efforts and contributions to this organization. We had more than 600 employees attend the event. We will be hosting our second employee appreciation event next week, where we will concentrate on the topic of healthy mind, healthy body, and will provide vendors who offer services that employees may utilize if and when they need it. Additionally, the Move to Win walking challenge will be launched at the event that is led by our safety section. Collaborate to build innovative technology. Our department has been in a year-long collaboration effort with the IT department to leverage technology and expand the NeoGov platform to include the employee performance management and learning management system. This will help digitize our evaluation process and will offer the tools necessary to be able to provide a vast amount of on-demand training courses for our employees. Moving forward, we are implementing an online testing program and digitizing our interview rating process to modernize and gain efficiencies where possible. We'll be implementing a safety management software solution that will enhance safety practices, streamline processes, and ensure compliance with regulatory standards. To explore new marketing opportunities, we have worked with Careers in Government to utilize their expertise in marketing hard-to-fill positions and reach a wider audience. We will also work on expanding our social media presence to promote our open positions with creative and eye-catching content. And lastly, to invest in employee development, we have hired a city resource specialist who is working on rebranding and relaunching our supervisory development program that will begin in August. And the learning management system that will come with NeoGov will provide an online option for employees to take courses on numerous topics at their convenience. And this will also help centralize the entire training program as a whole, as the training courses that we are required to offer by law and those that can be taken for personal development will be kept in one platform. That concludes our presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
My colleagues have any questions?
What was your budget? I'm trying to find it over here. Total human.
So the total budget for the
Which page are you on?
HR department is
22.
22. Okay, I'm at the wrong
So
spot.
it's, the total budget is 61 million citywide, of which 4.9 million is general fund.
Yeah, right here. Okay.
So the rest is all the employee fringe benefits, primarily medical insurance, our work comp insurance fund, compensated absences.
I'm sorry, when you say the rest, what was?
So out of that 61.1 million, the general fund is only 4.9 million.
Okay.
So the rest is all internal service funds. And so those are all the employee fringe benefits. So that includes dental, medical, vision, workers' comp insurance, or compensated absences, vacation, sick leave, et cetera, et cetera.
And that 1.9 increase is due to?
It's in the insurance. It's similar to the, similar to the liability insurance fund. It is the cost of insurance.
Got it. And I think at some point, not right now or next week, but the next few weeks, if you can maybe calculate and see how much extra insurances we're paying through all the departments compared to last year, that would be helpful to know. I mean. Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions.
I do. Do you have a formalized community outreach program for hiring and recruitment?
Mayor Asturian, members of the City Council, Manya Hunanian, Deputy Director of Human Resources. Formalized per se, no, but what we do have is we have various job fairs, various other platforms where events we will go to when we are notified about those events.
But you don't have anything that's proactive. So I remember during Matt Doyle's time, first of all, it's very common HR practice to have a formalized community outreach program that is proactive with respect to what we're trying to make our different departments look like. You know, Public Works might have different needs than Glendale Water and Power, than CDD, than housing, right? But what I do remember is there was extensive work done in with outreach with ethnic medias and even with the police department when we started changing up the recruitment during Mr. Doyle's time. There were PSAs that were created that were specific to the Armenian demographic and the Korean demographic that we were trying to hire. It's very common practice for any city to have a community outreach program guideline. And so if there isn't one, I would really like to know like what process is used, because it's not someone reaching out to you to say, hey, we're having this event, so come, kind of, it's ringing a lot of bells for me.
No, if I may, the way you described it, we do have, in the sense that we have a staff member who proactively will search for these types of events. But in addition to that, if there are events that if folks reach out to us, we do assess, you know, we have to look at availability, we have to look at if we can attend the event, and if we have positions available, if we have a lot of open positions and that audience is an appropriate audience for us, absolutely we will event. As far as the targeted recruitments within what's permitted, yes, we will do that as well. We have the ethnic journals.
So you have a formalized document that you can share?
Mayor, if I may. Per your request for the HR department to provide a report on recruitments and processes and the outreach, Ms. Adams is working on a report that would include that formalized outreach program as a component.
There isn't one.
No,
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, after you explained what you were looking for, we do have something to that effect. I just wasn't clear on what you were referring to in terms of formalized outreach. Community outreach, but Mr. Golanian is correct. Ms. Adams is working on a very detailed report or a document that will include all the information related to recruitments, including the outreach recruitment that we perform.
So the reason that I'm bringing this up, and I asked for the report, and I know the report's going to take time, for me it's not a matter of just like sticking with the status quo when it comes to staffing or needs for each of the departments. And if we, you know, part of our processes and part of our priorities in the last year was also creating a supportive work environment and looking at our recruitment and hiring practices and so forth. And so I don't know, I don't see a change in any request from HR. Whether it's for staffing or for programming or whatnot. So I'm just trying to get a better idea of like what are some of the things that tend to be common practice in other spaces and in other cities that maybe we're not doing in order for us as we're going through the budget to say, hey, maybe HR needs XYZ support in order for us to get what we want, or in order for, I don't know, recruitment and hiring to be at a faster pace if we want that,
Sure.
right? So
Yes, and then that's part of the exploring the new marketing opportunities. That's part of it, and that report will include all that information.
And Mayor, if there is a request for additional appropriation as the report comes forward, and as I noted earlier, if the direction is to hire however many police officers, however many planners, and then they'll have to, and I'm sure they'll have a plan in place for enhanced marketing to the folks that could qualify for these positions. but that will be all detailed out in the report.
Yeah. I am really excited to hear that you guys have a 5-year strategic plan. I would love to see it. So
Yes,
if
it's,
I,
it's
I would.
impressive.
Okay. If you can send me a copy, that would be great. I don't have any other questions. It doesn't look like anybody else does either.
Mayor Satrin, we have a caller specifically on the HR piece. Would you like to take it now?
I want to go through
whole
the
thing, okay.
report and then we'll take it. Thank you.
So next and the last department is Management Services, or the City Manager's Office. We have listed 4 highlights here, starting with the citywide strategic plan, as you mentioned, Mayor Asatryan. So we're in the process of hiring a consultant to help us design a comprehensive strategic plan, citywide strategic plan for the next 3 years. As you know, over the last couple of years, as I became your city manager, we collectively have established an annual work plan. My goal is that we shift toward a longer range plan for the next 3 years, with obviously intimate involvement by you and the council. And the consultant has scheduled interviews with you to get your input, as well as we'll get input from engaging the community to find out what's important to them. Another highlight that is of importance to council is community engagement, community outreach plan. I have noted this before. We really need to create a citywide plan, a tiered, enhanced approach to, or even a centralized approach to handling emergency, non-emergency, critical messaging through various channels. I'd like to see some form of standardization. Again, as you noted, we have been able to add positions in various departments as far as community outreach is concerned, with varying degree of success. Some have been very successful, at least on social media platforms, but the plan is to have a holistic approach to a citywide engagement and community outreach plan. We also want to embark on our next community satisfaction survey. Last time we had a survey was pre-pandemic, done in 2019. Next year, we like to launch that again to reassess communities' priorities and more of a broader demographics, since the population has changed over the last few years. This has come up, I think, at the last budget study session, Women's Equality Day Summit that was requested. My office will partner with Commission on the Status of Women and other organizations within the community and City Clerk's office to host a summit around August 26th. One thing that's not highlighted or mentioned here is an enhanced sister city program. That's a desire of the council. Staff is working on a report to bring back to council with some options and seek directions. More than likely, this effort and the community outreach enhancement will require additional staffing, and we will make that request for appropriation as necessary.
I don't see anybody else that has comments, but one is the PIO communications staff member. I know that there was an attempt to do hiring for that. I know we've talked about having a larger communication plan for the last year and a half. We're the 4th largest city in LA County, Mr. Glanian. Like, we don't have a PIO for the city. I mean, we used to have a PIO, we used to have a community outreach person, there was a lot of that, and there's a lot happening in the city. What's the timeline for this?
I couldn't agree more. There's a lot happening in the city. We're the 4th largest city in LA County. We have lost staff, primarily in my office. But again, as a reminder, a few years ago, when I was appointed city manager, our financial standing wasn't as good as it is today, which is good news. And you are correct. We went through a process of trying to hire a PIO. We had a couple of good candidates, but as is the case, a lot of cases nowadays with recruitments, they found better options and higher pay. So we need to revisit that. Again, my goal is to have a plan. This plan will include staffing, and at what different levels. More than likely, it will include a PIO and additional staffing, especially if the goal is to centralize our communication efforts. So when timeline, I would say within the next 6 months, we should have a final document in place that we can bring forward to council for direction.
Okay, and then one is, I don't know where this would fall, but we also talked about grant writers.
Yes.
A lot of the grants that are out there also allow for a percentage of reimbursement from the grant. So it really, like, at the end of the day, there's opportunity for it to pay, like, the positions would pay for themselves,
staffing costs,
right? Looking at all the opportunities that are out there, making sure maybe we're having one for Glendale PD and Fire, Glendale Water and Power, I don't know, but knowing the amount of stuff that is talked about that's out there, just want to know what the status is for grant writers. Our economic development department can, I think, as we look at our programming, all of those things are also opportunity for us to get funding through grants, right?
Very true, Mayor Asatryan, and that's something else that we have talked about. Again, we have competing interests or needs in every department, but it's not lost on me that there are grants out there that could potentially pay for the staff cost, if not more. We do have a very good grant writer in Community Service and Parks. She has been able to bring to us a number of grants. Mr. Taktalian and our public safety departments are in the process of finalizing a contract with a grant writing consulting firm that for the time being will help bridge that gap until such time that we're able to put a unit together and see where we can take this.
Okay, I mean, I do think, but between like the infrastructure.
Yeah, Public Works has, absolutely.
And GWP.
GWP, Public Works, Public Safety.
Okay.
Right.
Right, that's all I got. Anything else?
Well, next is the follow-up items that over the course of the last 3 budget study session, council has asked for, and individual department heads associated with these requests will make the presentation and respond to your questions.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. Councilmember Garpetian, you had requested the last session some information related to the Vertigo Wash. As you're aware, we have a $6 million grant, really $5 million from one grant, another $1 million from the state. You requested some information regarding the amount of hours we expect to use. That's something we can't, there's not an exact science behind that. We don't track hours when it comes to this kind of work because there's not something to build back to. We estimated that we'll probably be between 5 and 15% of total time of 2 staff members, between a project manager, essentially, and a supervisor over that person. Doing a project such as this and managing a contract like this, you don't necessarily work on it consistently every week. You may spend a half a week, 1 week, and then not revisit for another 2 to 3 months, depending on where you are in that phase. So our estimate comes to about 5 to 15%, about $45,000 total when it comes to staff time. A comment was also made about potentially redirecting that grant. That is something we had looked at before per another council member's request a number of months back. We cannot apply that grant in another circumstance or to another project. That is something we had looked into. The state and Caltrans have already set what the scope of that grant will be and what the expectations of it are. So the second part, Mayor, you had requested some information regarding our first-time homebuyers program. That was a line item that was in the budget. You had noted that there was no money allocated to that. That is something that's left over from our original program back in 2012, 2013, and then 13 to 14. That was that utilized grant money to assist in first-time home buyers, particularly related to a down payment. We leave that in there because if someone who owns one of those units sells that unit, some of that money comes back to us so that we can can assist someone else in purchasing that unit once it goes in the market. We don't have funds allocated to that. As we estimated from our housing division, it would take about $250,000 to $400,000 to assist someone in today's market of someone who has moderate income to be able to purchase a home. Per the request earlier, we can come back with a report to investigate other opportunities, but note that that was not funded by the city, that was funded by a grant. We can look around for other opportunities to see if we can initiate a program like that again. I'll stop there if there's any questions on these two topics before moving to the next.
Mr. Garpetian.
Yes, I understand the grant you mentioned that it cannot be used for any other. What are the other options? Not just only for this project. Let's say there's a grant for a certain project, and let's say Assembly Member Laura Friedman brought this grant to Glendale, basically, and if she changes her mind for some strange reason and says, can the state change the direction, or because it's set in concrete, if you don't use it for that project, it has to go back to state?
Of course, the state would have the opportunity to change their mind on that grant if they decided to. Okay.
All right. And also, as far as the staff time and the amount of it, I'm not going to debate that here. I believe it's a lot more than $45,000 comparing, if you consider the hours that we spent in the staff time in council meetings, in community outreach meetings, preparing the documents, preparing staff report and everything else. But it's okay. Thank you for giving us this document. But I think it's a lot more than that. But that's my opinion. It's not something that we want to debate here. It's just a budget thing, and I appreciate your effort to bring the numbers for us. Thank you.
Councilmember Garpetian, you had noted some differences in some fees and permits. We went back and did some research and looked at that, and you were right. The design review fee, you'll see that, I believe, yes, the design review fee. There's a discrepancy there between the 2 to 50 units. It's about $9,500. For 51 to 100, it's $8,900, and then 100 or more, it's $9,100. Our recommendation would be to take that 2 to 50 unit fee and lower that, so it's more in line and more progressive, if you will, or linear with the other fees that are there. That is something we'll have to take a look at lowering and what that fee should be. But you did acknowledge that correctly. That there was some issues in there. It was not accurate compared to the rest.
All right, and I think that the number for single family has to be reduced compared to 50 to 100, 51 to 100 unit, it's 8,900, and single family is six. I understand you said it's stacked up and the review is easier, but it's not that simple. I mean, I think that number has to be reduced compared to everything else. And also, if you look at the conditional use permit for below, yeah, that has nothing to do with 50 residential units. Yeah, I mean, the design review board fees has to be kind of fair. A guy, works all his life and saves money and buys a house and wants to remodel it or wants to build a new house, he pays almost the same amount of money as 51 to 100 residential, multi-residential units. I think these are the numbers we have to look at, and I think that number has to be reduced compared to the other fees that we have.
What I would say that if I may, a fee study was executed on that and looked at the number of hours that were spent into that. And yes, that project is smaller, you are correct, but the process itself is not all that different. It's by and large the same, unless you're doing a project in downtown, which then requires you go to the DRB, then you come to council, then you go back. Otherwise, if you're doing a multifamily project in a non-downtown area commercial corridor, they're going through the exact same process that a single family home is. That's the same level of noticing, the same number of meetings potentially. So I do believe that number there accurately reflects the staff time that goes into that. If if council decides they would like to subsidize a portion of that, we could do that, we could consider that. But that number does accurately reflect the amount of time that has to go into a DRB meeting. What I would add on to that, though, is that in future consideration, as you are all aware, we are going through and modifying these processes. We're changing these, we're trying to streamline them, we're trying to make them easier. If it comes back that we have streamlined this so much so that it's reduced the amount of hours, we could go back and then consider that fee should be more appropriately in line with that time that's going into it.
Yeah, I haven't seen a 51 to 100 unit project outside downtown area. There isn't one out there. So just by saying that because it's outside downtown and it goes through the same process, that's not accurate either. I think the ones that are in downtown, there are more processes, there's more review that needs to be done. That downtown projects are more complicated because of downtown specific plan and the requirements that we have. A single family and a 51 to 100 unit project, there will never be the same amount of time for reviewing it. Maybe the process, they have to go to staff and, go back and forth and make sure the design is acceptable to staff, and then they file for design review board and they go to the board. Maybe that process is the same, but as far as staff time reviewing a project, I'm having a hard time accepting that. So that 6,700, you may call it a subsidy, but I think that's excessive charge. That's the way I feel.
I do know that the comparison was not at the 51 to the 100. You're correct. There are not many outside of downtown that have been built at, but it doesn't mean that there won't be. Our zoning has changed. Our development standards have changed. This is more of a comparison whether or not the amount of work that goes into a downtown project versus a non-downtown project, whether it's multifamily or not. Yes, downtown goes through more steps and processes. Outside of downtown, they all go through the exact same process, though. When you get to the plan checking portion, you are correct. That is much easier, right? Going through and looking at a single-family home for their HVAC system is very different from a 40-unit building, right? Sure. That takes a lot more work. When we're looking at just that DRB component, though, the amount of steps that go into that, the amount of hours that go into that, the coordination, collaboration, yes, it is less than a multifamily. But it's by and large pretty much the same process. But again, if we go and make these changes that we've been coming forward with, and we're going to continue to bring more, and we find that lowers that time, we could definitely relook at this and take or consider lowering that even further, or obviously up to the council's discretion now if you would like to see that lowered now.
I think it should be lowered now. Again, we're going around the same circle. Right now, we don't have any project outside downtown area, which is 100 units. We only have projects in downtown specific zone that has 50 to 100 units, even 40 units. I haven't seen anything. Maybe there is one or two outside. I haven't seen it. If I haven't seen it, it's not there. So again, the reviewing a project that's 100 units versus a single family house, it doesn't take the same time. It takes a lot more time from staff to review the design. There is no way that could be the same amount of time as reviewing a 3,000 square foot single family house. The circulation is different, the easements are different, the design is different, the height is different, everything is different, the setbacks are different. It's not the same. So what I'm saying is maybe they're paying less. Maybe single family has to be $6,700, but the 50 to 100 units in downtown cannot be $8,900. Maybe that number is low. Maybe you have to reevaluate it and increase that one, or maybe decrease the single family to make it proportionate. Because the way it is, I don't think it's the fair numbers, fair amount.
Right. Weren't we going through a process where we were also going to look at what goes to design review board? I think that was one of the things that we had a back and forth on many sessions back. And I thought we had agreed that we're going to look at that.
Yes, so if you recall, Mayor, council members, that last batch of code improvements we brought forth, that took some things out of DRB's scope. A part of that future work plan is to look at what else continues to go to DRB, or even what that process looks like, how much work actually goes into that. That is part of the work plan.
Okay. Go on.
Yes, if there are no other questions or there's no direction per council member Garpetian's request.
Well, I mean, I support it being lower, but it's, I thought Mr. Calvert was gonna look at it and make the adjustments and stuff for the residential fee.
Yes, we can make the adjustment. You can see that, especially that 2 to 50 range is much higher. There is not a relationship to the rest. And you're right, we don't see a lot of those projects, but again, it doesn't mean that we're not going to. Our zoning has changed. things have changed. There will be 2 to 50 unit projects that come in that are not downtown. We see that now. We're going to continue to see that. That is the number that is kind of out of whack with the rest of them if you look at them.
So you're just going to
So
fix
our
that, right?
recommendation would be to lower that number.
Okay.
And then as we continue to go through this process over the next year of code improvements, code changes, and potentially even more of a fee study, going back and recalibrating all of those as we start to take certain tasks and responsibilities out.
I think my concern was more about the single-family fees, not the 2 to 50.
Well, I think
which
it's
is higher.
twofold. I would be open for that amount to be reduced until we figure out what we're doing with what goes to DRB to begin with. I think there's very few cities out there that actually have all the stuff that goes to our DRB. Like, it's very unique. And so I would be open to lowering the single family and adjusting the 2 to 50.
If I may.
Oh, yes, please.
I don't think we should be moving fees around, sitting here on the dais without, just based on our impressions. You say that we did a fee study. This is all governed by Prop 218, right?
Correct.
So we can't charge any more than it costs us to provide the service. We can charge less. That's a subsidy.
Correct.
So if we're going to make a decision about subsidizing certain costs, I think we should be making that holistically, looking at all of our fees and what we want to subsidize. And I know you have a slide coming up on that. But I'm a little uncomfortable kind of just saying, we think that this shouldn't cost this much and that should. You did a fee study. We had somebody come in. If there's a question about it, maybe we go back and relook at some of the assumptions in that fee study, and you can come back to us saying, yes, we think this was, maybe we overlooked something or we underestimated something or something like that. But I would rather do it a little bit more methodically than just sit here and say, yes, raise this one, lower that one.
No, I never said raise one or lower the other one. What I said was, when I look at numbers, I'm a numbers guy. It doesn't take less amount of time to review a 20 to 50 unit apartment building than a single family. That's the only thing I raised. I never said we have to reduce one or increase one. I raised the question that cannot be that you you design review a 50 unit project or 100 unit project, and it takes the same amount of time as a single family house. I know we do cost studies, and that's why I was kind of not believing that $45,000 for Verdugo Wash, because there's no way that it would take only $45,000. But that's a different story. We have to look at it. It has to be proportionate. It has to be reasonable. It has to make common sense. If you have a 2,500 square foot house and that you're reviewing the design, it will not take as much as a 100 unit apartment building. That's just common sense to me. I'm not saying arbitrarily just reduce the fees today. What I'm saying is it doesn't make sense to me. That's what we're talking about budget. And I don't know who did this fee study, but I don't know how many hours does it take for a single family, but I know it takes a lot longer than, 100 units will take a lot longer than a single family house. That's what I'm saying.
All right, so why are these fees here now?
Questions were raised during the last.
We're not making that fee decision as part of the budget, right?
You could, because next time we meet on the budget will be adoption. So if there are any changes that council would like to be incorporated in the budget, we'd like to know now, today.
Right.
I just want to briefly add, I agree with Mr. Brotman that this is all based on a fee study. We can't just eyeball these figures and say this should be lower than the other. If anything, we do need to go back and see what the assumptions were and validate the fee study and see if it really does take the same amount of time or slightly less for a single family than a 51 unit. So something that we can look into, but we just can't be, designing it on the fly.
Okay, moving on, next slide. Mr. Calvert still has half of that slide.
Just half of the slide. I'll keep it brief. Some questions were asked about how many situ off-hours inspections were completed by our staff, or total number of inspections. Building safety completed about 27,944. Neighborhood services, just under 13,000. We had about 18 hours of those were dedicated to either emergencies or large projects. There are instances such as mudslides where our staff had to go out. There were instances for major projects where it only made sense to go out there during maybe a weekend or an evening because of an installation that was occurring. It's not something that is very common for our department. We don't dedicate a lot of time or a lot of overtime to staff doing those kind of exercises. It's relatively limited. I do know there's some information there for fire. I'm happy to let the fire marshal, if he's present, or fire chief, either one, address those questions and comments.
I was the one that had asked. I don't have, I just wanted to know what the numbers were because I keep hearing rumors about, oh, they're coming overtime, they're coming on weekends, they're coming, and so I just wanted the numbers in front of me. That's all.
Very limited instances,
So then I'm, you know, and that applied also to fire. So if I have the numbers in front of me, then it's easier for me to respond to those. Okay.
Great. Next slide is also Chief Fish's responsibility.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. Just real quick, if you want to see those numbers, or if you want to know those numbers real quick, it's the outside normal hours was 800 for multifamily residences, which are basically hotels and motels, and assemblies, 25 special events, and 15 new construction. Those were all paid for by salary savings because we had 2 vacancies last year. So it was all, in the end, a wash. It was just done after hours by current staff that we had.
And not overtime, right? Because off hours can also, that doesn't really equate to overtime.
It was not charged as overtime to the occupant or to the builder. But it was paid as overtime to the employee because that's FLSA requirement.
So the applicant doesn't pay for the...
No, but when you gave me the normal hours for 14,767.
That's just normal hours.
Right.
Yeah, that's not overtime.
But
There's
they're not overtime.
Correct.
Normal hours are not overtime.
Normal hours are not overtime.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
And then for item number 5, fire and paramedic tuition for ambulance operators, budget redirected to the Girls Camp program. So this was something that kind of went into a dark hole. I don't know how, I never saw it, and I never knew about it because I don't have a budget manager right now. We're hiring for that right now. It's one of the vacancies that I have. And so we're in the process of trying to figure out best steps moving forward. And I think the best steps moving forward from my perspective to get qualified females into the organization, at least as it relates to the sworn side of the house, is to hold a girls camp. These girls camps have been done in LA County and LA City. They're very successful. They bring in a lot of people that are curious about the fire service as a career, and we actually we sink our hooks into them. We mentor them. We build them into future firefighters, and then we hire them. And so everybody that we've hired so far in the fire service, at least in Glendale, the 2 that we've hired, we've done that through a process of mentoring and adopting them as our own, and kind of helping them build upper body strength, because that's one of the things that's required to get through the fire academy. And so we also have those 2 that are going to help during that girls camp. So this is something that we'll use that $66,000. I don't think it's going to cost quite $66,000. However, I would recommend that with that extra money that we do have in that fund, that we would just go heavy on recruitment and bring in more people from college programs where there's athletic programs with women in there. So yeah, that's something that we would like to do. And we will definitely not have the problem retaining people in our ambulance operator program because we pay very well right now. We are the top paid ambulance operator program in Southern California. So we are the beacon on the hill, if you will. People are flocking to us in great numbers. We are actually fully hired for the first time that I know of since we've implemented that program, at least at the ambulance operator program level. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have on that.
I mean, I was the one that had brought this up last year, just because of our conversations with the former fire chief that said that this would be helpful. But I do have to say, I mean, you came in and talked about the camp last week when you didn't know the 66,000 was
Correct.
there. So, you know, you were going to do it without us allocating
No, I was
that?
going to use some creative funding through salary savings and through some other funding. I was going to make that happen, yeah.
I
It's an
think
important
wherever, I mean, the end goal was really both for, you know, women firefighters, ambulance. So whatever helps in that space, I mean, we allocated that to ensure that, you know, we get women and girls. So if it's camp, then maybe that also allows for you, not just for recruitment, but to up the number of participants.
We could do that too, absolutely. With the extra funds, we definitely will. But as far as we're concerned, we won't have a cap on it. We'll probably cap our own particular, because it's a Tri-City event. We were thinking about 20 each. Maybe Glendale will double that number. But absolutely, if there's enough people that are
We also do
interested,
something
we'll do it.
with our local school district.
Absolutely.
Right, it's an area for partnerships.
Quick question. Chief, we have two female firefighters.
Correct. One's an engineer and one's a firefighter paramedic.
You don't pay them any less than the same man in that position, do you?
They're not paid any
mean-
less or any more. They're paid exactly what an engineer paramedic is paid and what a firefighter paramedic.
How about
is.
prospective ambulance operators? You make no distinction based on gender?
No distinction.
Okay, that's good.
They're all paid the same.
Thank you.
Mr. Garbetian?
You said the pays are really high and everybody's running to us. What is the pay for?
So if you get hired on and you have your EMT and it's your first year, you get $23 an hour. This is an hourly position. And for anybody that's completed their task book and they've completed 1 full year in the seat, they will get $25 an hour. And this was recently just adjusted, I want to say about 3 months ago. And I got to tell you, it's making a huge difference in our ability to recruit qualified people. We're seeing people all over the place looking at our program as opposed to like Downey, Huntington Beach, or a lot of these other AO programs that are similar to ours.
Got it. Thank you, Chief.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Next up is Mr. Bulanikian, our Director of Community Service and Parks, who has 2 follow-up items.
Good afternoon, Mayor Satari and members of the City Council. 2 follow-up items real quick. The first item was higher fees and lower priority to outside entities using city facilities. So we do have, as part of our current fee schedule, we do have the resident and non-resident rate for our aquatics program, day camp program, and skate park. We also have a field reservation policy that our Parks, Recreation, and Community Service Commission approved about a little over a year ago, where approved youth groups get priority for field reservations, then nonprofits, and then we have our standard rate and commercial rate. We will look at other cities, the Tri-City area as well as City of LA, on what policies they have in terms of resident and non-resident rate, and we'll bring back those findings to the Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Commission. The second item is set commercial fees as full cost recovery and discounted for standard and nonprofit rate. If we go ahead and do this, it will result in 153 fees added to the fee schedule, as well as the percentage for each standard rate will change. We currently have our nonprofit rate, which is a 25% discount of the standard rate, and a commercial rate, which is 150% more than the standard rate. We were requesting to add a footnote as part of the citywide fee schedule and take some of our fees out to clean up our schedule. But if we go ahead and set the commercial fees at full cost recovery, it will basically have different percentage breakdown for each fee. If council decides to move forward with that, we will present our findings to the Parks Commission after council approves the fee schedule. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Mr. Brotman?
Yeah, I think that was one I raised. So you're saying if we made this adjustment, you're saying it would result in 153 new fees? Or just 153 that would have to be changed?
153 new fees that would be added to the fee schedule.
Because, I'm confused. But would it bring in more fees? Or are we just talking about rearranging the deck?
It would be rearranging the deck and bringing some of the more fees, but mostly rearranging the deck. Our commercial rate, we only charge commercial rate really at the Civic Auditorium. And back in 2023, we had 28 reservations that were charged commercial rate, and then our film permits. Other than that, at our community centers and buildings, we usually just charge the nonprofit rate or the standard rate.
So you don't see any value in doing this?
No.
Just a kind of a time waster?
Well, it won't be a time waster. It'll be hard to actually figure out the percentage. It'll be challenging.
Yeah, okay. It's not important enough that I want to pursue it. If you think it's working the way it is today?
Yes.
Okay.
I think what Mr. Bulanikian is trying to say is it wouldn't really net us a whole significant amount of additional revenue.
Okay.
It's not just not worth it.
Okay, I don't want make work, so, yeah.
There are no other questions. We'll pass the baton to Mr. Bradford to cover the rest of the follow-up items.
Thank you. So there was a question about exploring the possibility to increase Glendale's share of the 1% property tax. Those are our relative percentages next to the what Burbank and Pasadena. We currently get 13.5%, obviously lower than Burbank and Pasadena. The short answer is I'm not really aware of any mechanism to do that. This was all set back in Prop 13. And I'm not aware of any city ever doing that, quite frankly. You know, we were told by our consultant the schools are prevented from negotiating their shares, so you'd really have to negotiate with the county, and I just, again, I'm not aware of that ever happening. So there was another question on pension obligation bonds. When is this a bad idea? Again, short answer is now. Given where rates are, there's just not enough spread between what PERS is charging us and where current interest rates are, generate enough savings to mitigate the risks. And there's really two when you go down this path. PERS rate of return risk. What if they don't make their 6.8%? And the second one is PERS can, and they have in the past, change an underlying assumption. They can lower the discount rate. They can change life expectancies. They can make different assumptions when it relates to wage increases, et cetera, et cetera. All to say, proceeding with the validation process now can allow us to take advantage of that, but if we did it, and if and when rates do drop, we'd have to go do a lot more math. We'd have to really, really run a lot of simulations in order to really say what could really go wrong and could we make the problem go worse, and more importantly, what is the probability of occurrence of that happening? That's kind of the longer answer to the question.
If I may. Yeah, I think I was the one that asked this question. So, and the validation process you said was like $45,000? What was it?
The estimate we got was about 25,000.
25,000?
And it takes roughly, I want to say about 6 months to file it with the court, basically saying this is an obligation enforceable by law, and the court validates that.
Okay. I mean, I'm still somewhat skeptical of these kinds of financial structures, but if the question that staff is asking is whether we should at least proceed with the validation so we're ready to take action if and when we want to, I'm okay with that. So I don't know if any, what other people feel.
I would support that as well.
Okay, there was a question on the subsidized fees breakdown by department. So we've gone back and listed the fee subsidy. Obviously, the general fund is where most of the subsidy was. And as we indicated when we covered this, community service and parks had the largest subsidy out of all the departments listed. And that, again, is very common, not only with Glendale, but agencies up and down the region. And then there's a small portion of subsidy in the non-general fund, with the total subsidy being $3.9 million.
I think I want to follow up on that.
Okay.
I guess I want, and it's not for this budget adoption, but I would like to take a closer look at what we're subsidizing specifically. I mean, are we subsidizing things that we would generally feel are community benefit, or are we subsidizing things that accrue to, let's say, a particular business or other kind of commercial operation or something else? I mean, is there equity in what we're subsidizing? I would like to look at that. I don't think it's urgent, but that was, I think I might have asked at one time, can we get like a really detailed breakdown? So they could be thoughtful about what is it, where is it that we want to spend our dollars? Because every dollar that we spend on a subsidy is a dollar we're not spending on helping some other cause, right? That's all.
That list is complete, done, I believe, and we'll share with council.
Okay.
And I believe the last follow-up question, there was a question on how the cannabis tax was working for Pasadena. They currently collect about $600,000 per year. They have 3 dispensaries, and then they get about $260,000 in sales tax. Interestingly enough, when I talked to the Pasadena finance director, they spent quite a bit of money shutting down the illegal ones to protect the 3 that were permitted to operate in the city. And the estimate I got from him was about $2 million a year to do that. So, and then there was a question about state cannabis tax revenue. Is the forecast for 23-24 was $675 million, and it's allocated, as you see, between youth, environmental, and law enforcement. And that does conclude the presentation.
Do we have any, have we had any illegal?
Mayor Asatryan, not to my knowledge, no, we don't.
No.
We haven't.
If I might. Still on cannabis tax. So what again was the estimated revenue?
Ours was about, I want to say 3 times that. Or am I overshooting it? It's
Why would that be?
Well,
because they only have 1?
They have 3, and I think we forecasted 5 or 6. So maybe if we, okay, yeah. So based on the demographics the consultant put out, they estimated 5 would open in Glendale, or if 5 opened in Glendale, I should say, or were permitted to operate in Glendale. That was the revenue estimate, and I want to say it was
Based off of what percentage?
4%.
But then you have some cities that are going all the way up to 8, right?
I believe Pasadena, based on their ballot measure, was up to 12, 10 or 12. They've only allowed so far 3.
Okay.
What was that? So the revenue range was, again?
So the consultant gave a percentage of about 4 to 6% range.
Yeah.
Because that's what they saw overall in closer jurisdictions. And the dollar amount equated to between 1.9 million to 2.6 million.
1.9 to 2.6 million. And then you're saying Pasadena is spending all this additional money that they wouldn't otherwise be spending to shut down illegal?
Well, I don't know about otherwise, right? They could have spent that money regardless of whether they had permitted or licensed dispensaries or not.
That is true. That is just the
And that's from the finance department, not from the police department.
Right, that is what just the Pasadena finance director indicated to me. Now, whether they would have spent those dollars otherwise is a fair point.
Okay, and can I?
Yes.
So 1.9 to 2.6 million, and our kind of costs, was that net of the cost? Because we would have a third party managing all the, all the
Sure.
kind of compliance.
I don't
right?
believe those estimates were net of the administration costs.
They were not.
What was he saying, like 20%? What are they?
I think that was for the business license tax, if I recall. I don't think we had an estimate on the administration of this particular tax.
But we wouldn't get the whole 1.9 to 2.6.
There'd be some
then.
administrative costs, but I don't think it would be, in this particular case, I don't think it would be near the 20%.
Okay.
20%.
Yeah.
For business or for cannabis?
For cannabis, he said there's 20% of fees to manage everything.
Did he say 20? Okay.
I remember, but
Okay. So I guess I'd like to, I mean, if we're going to go ahead with this is something we would have to request now, right?
Have to request, you can request now or at any time, and we'll bring back, the report that you received from the consultant was a high-level information, so we'll bring it back with more concrete numbers, processes, and all the questions that you may have from them, and then take it from there.
And I don't really want to put him on the spot, but could I ask Chief Sid what his gut tells him about having these operations in Glendale, whether this is going to cause a additional expense for law enforcement?
Mayor and council, loaded question. My gut would tell me that with any business, with any extra amount of residents that we bring to the city, there's always going to be an associated cost and a potential impact on public safety. That said, I will tell you, just based on my experience on having dealt with a similar thing in the previous city that I worked for, I think the really important part is how we structure it on the front side. I think is really going to ultimately dictate how much work it creates for us on the back end. And the process that the council, the city goes through in selecting these individuals, are we talking about retail? Are we talking about manufacturing, cultivation? That's going to change the dynamics of it all. I think if really well done, it could minimize the amount of work that we see ultimately on the public safety end of things. But again, I would really emphasize the importance for a good process and making sure that we make good selections about the types of businesses that we bring into the city.
And your experience in Culver City was there a lot of retail crime associated with the shops? Was there vagrancy? Was it bringing in people that were causing other kinds of crimes?
That was obviously the concern. I will tell you, obviously a much smaller city. What ultimately regulated it to only 3 retail locations. And in a nutshell, those retail locations look like an Apple store. And that was by design. And also had on-site security, unarmed, but on-site security. That they paid for, required sally ports, certain times of delivery, pickup and drop off in regards to things being delivered from the business end of things, certain ways that merchandise was handled in the store, security cameras that the police department had access to at any time, 24/7, 365, on and on. So ultimately the impacts that it was having, there was also sensitive receptors, couldn't be around anywhere close to schools or residential neighborhoods, had to be in a business district. So it was very stringent on, where this could be, what it could look like, so on and so forth. And ultimately on the back end, it did not add any significant impacts to quality of life issues or vagrancy or loitering or anything like that. Again, the cultivation, manufacturing, those were nondescript, large warehouse type businesses that unless you knew what was in there, the average person walking by wouldn't even know what's inside.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. So, I'll just, from my point of view, if we can, generate a good $2 million in net revenue, I would be, at least for looking at it, at least because it would have to go to the voters, right? If the community supported it, then I think it would be okay. I'm not opposed to it because I know that people can get this anywhere anyway. It's here. It's just a matter whether we make money on the sale or somebody else does. So I'm not opposed to it, but I want to make sure that we're actually getting our money, we're getting something for it. We're not ending up chewing all the costs up with, law enforcement and with administration and with this and that and the other thing. So that would be kind of where I'm coming from. If it's a decent source of revenue, if the community agrees with it, I'm okay. So I'm on record.
Okay, and if you'd like, council and mayor, if we can get two more votes, we can bring it back as an item since today's agenda was.
I don't know if we're going to vote, but I would, yes.
Just to look into.
I'm a yes for looking into it. Don't know where my colleagues are.
Councilman Garpetian.
I'm totally opposed to it. This is not something that the city needs. We don't need cannabis in Glendale. The money is not that attractive. Just a consultant who's going to handle also handling the cannabis business, his assumption is $1.5 million, maybe $2 million. He's gonna take 20% off of it off the top, plus the enforcement. I think Chief was very generous with his comments. I think there are many cities who have it. They have so many problems. There's so many robberies, cultivations. Look at the Sound Valley and Tahunga. Within 2 blocks, they have 3 or 4 of them. They have armed guards in front of their business. Anytime you have to have armed security guard to protect your business, there's something wrong with it. And also, this cultivation facilities, they get robbed so many times because people who are part of the larger gang affiliation they know, they have inside information as to when these things are ready to go, and they attack those cultivation facilities right at the peak time. So I don't think we need that. This is a $1.2 billion city, $1 million up or down. We can save that $1 million by cutting, so many, so many unnecessary projects that we're doing. I'm being on the record. I want to be, on the record that I'm totally against it. I voiced my opinion in 2017 and 2019, and nothing has changed. I have 3 children. If I vote to even discuss this, if I vote to approve cannabis in Glendale, I'm telling my children it's okay for you to smoke marijuana, and I will not do that. That's where I am. Thank you.
Mr. Najarian.
I'm totally against it, regardless of the tax revenue, whether it brought in $10 million a year to us. I do think it sends the wrong message. Glendale is not that type of city where we have to have these cannabis shops, or now cannabis cafes, I think, that are now popping up or being approved by this state. So I'm totally against it.
Councilmember Kasakian.
For the record, I've never ever tried marijuana. I've never had any desire to. I have not smoked, inhaled, whatever else you need, or eaten any substance containing marijuana. But I don't think I have as negative as an outlook on some of it as some of my colleagues have mentioned. I understand that like any substance, it can be abused, but there's also a lot of research that shows that it has certain medicinal benefits for people who suffer from chronic illnesses. So I think we need to keep a sober outlook. My only issue is for the amount, I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze, for what we would get for it. I don't know if it's the right time to explore this as an option. I would much rather look at possible digital billboards as revenue generation, and that has been brought and discussed here before. But to say that this is completely off the table, who knows where we're going to be? Maybe not this council, but future councils may look at this and consider it. And as Councilmember Brotman mentioned, ultimately anything of this sort would have to be approved by the voters anyways. Personally, again, it's not like Councilmember Garpetian said, it's not something that I would want my child to partake in, but we're also seeing a movement across the country where most states, I believe over 40, have legalized marijuana use in some shape or form. There's different uses or different licenses associated with this. There's laboratory testing sites. There is storage. It's not necessarily the retail sale. So I think that there does need to be, at some point, an open mind. Again, I respect the hardline rhetoric that some of my colleagues want to take on this, but one of the things that we do as a council as we're studying budgets is looking at how to make the tough decisions for the financial health of the city. At this time, I'm a no. That doesn't mean I'm a never.
All right. There you have it. Is that it? Is there anything else?
That does it for budget study session number 4, our final budget study session. If there are any additional questions, thank you for your participation, your engagement, your feedback. On June 4th, we will...
I'm sorry?
I'm not sure where we were going.
So next time we bring the item on the budget will be June 4th for the public hearing and adoption.
We have a caller.
Yes, Madam Mayor, we have one caller. The caller is Fernando Roldan. Fernando, you're on air. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Really quickly, regarding the HR and I'm glad that you mentioned talk a lot about women and equal pay and equal rights. But Madam Mayor and members of the council, I like to see HR hire more people with disabilities, with physical limitations. Also, those who are deaf and hard of hearing, those who are blind, those who are on wheelchairs. I would like to see my city be equal, especially because since I'm as a working man and working for the State of California Employment Development Department, I would be more proud to see the city grow more in the hiring of people with disabilities. With respect to what everybody was mentioning about marijuana, may I remind the council mayor that there are medical benefits to that, as long as there can be regulations with the marijuana or the dispensaries. Then I would really suggest that this could be used only and only for medical situations only. That's my 2 cents on that, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Thank you.
Thank you, and that is all.
Okay, so
Well, I did want to make a comment before we adjourn.
I have some wrap-up comments.
Okay, then go ahead, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I have a number of things that, I've been holding on to for the end. Not in any particular order, but I did bring up CERT when we were hearing from the fire department. And one thing I do want to make sure is that funds for CERT don't get repurposed, because I think sometimes when there's a need that seems more urgent, people will pick different pockets to make things work. So I would like us to consider a line item for CERT or some other way that we can make sure that there is sufficient money to run this program. That would be one point. Another one is, and I think I asked the city manager this, I just want to get follow-up. I know we're looking at doing bike detection at various intersections. Is that included? Do we have the funds in the budget to be able to roll that out?
Councilmember Brotman, I've checked with Public Works, and they were confirming, yes, they just
Seeing a
confirmed that
thumbs up? Okay.
the bike detection elements and facilities are included in specific Public Works projects, roadway improvements, so they just get ramped into the budget for them.
Okay. Third one, on the public benefit charge for GWP, I know it's a 2-year budget that we approved last year, but we've also increased utility rates, so there should be more money coming into that pot. I would like to understand what now is the increment that is unallocated that we can, so we can talk about maybe there's some more money we can give to existing programs, maybe we can run an additional program, maybe we could do something with community solar. We don't have to do that now.
Actually,
unless you want to.
Yeah, let's have staff, Audrey and Sion, respond to
For
that
the,
question.
if I may, Mr. Glani, for the sake of time, because we also have closed session.
Right.
I think from what I saw, our closed session is also extensive. Is it possible for you to, get these responses back? I'm just trying to figure out how we're going to be, we've been here since 1 o'clock.
Right.
It's almost 5.
Right.
Our regular session starts at 6, and we have a closed session, so.
And Councilmember Brotman has asked these questions. I haven't had a chance to run it by staff. But if this question is not answered, then we'll have to bring it back next, on June 4th with the budget hearing. So if you have
Well, I'm not looking for us to make decisions on this. I would just like to know.
Then I'll get the response and forward it to you.
Yeah, I would just like to know, because I'm thinking there is some increment now, and I think that we should be.
I have the list, your list.
We should be talking about doing that. Yeah, another thing is the placeholder for implementation of the E3 recommendations. We're going to have some extensive recommendations from E3.
Okay.
That one, maybe we do need to talk about next week at the adoption, because
We'll find out.
I want to know whether we're going to be able to have the budget to be able to implement the things that they're recommending. I know one thing that has come up in the past is commission stipends for commissioners. I see Councilmember Kasakian nodding his head because he's probably been the one that's brought this up more than anyone.
So if you need a third for that one, I'm happy to support that as well.
I would,
As you're working
yeah,
towards-
okay.
Yeah.
I would like us to consider putting in a placeholder, if that's what it is, so that we, or just we come back and talk about it later
Yeah, we
and
don't
we
need
can.
placeholders.
Yeah, okay.
The amount is not that significant.
Okay. And I want to mention that the speed camera thing came up at one of the earlier sessions, and I just thought I would mention that I saw that San Jose was just granted $6.5 million from a group called Safe Streets and Roads, or Safe Streets and Roads for All, to cover the cost of speed cameras. So if we haven't looked at that, I don't remember what we concluded as far as who pays for these cameras, whether we are supposed to be paying for them, but
Yeah, the way I understand Councilman Brotman is the cities pay for it and then get reimbursed.
Okay, well, there seems to be grant money, so let's go for the grant. The last thing is, I'm still a little bit floored in a good way by how the 5-year forecast looks. But it is disturbing because, this is what staff has been communicating to us and what I know I've been saying out in the public, and I said it at the State of the City speech is, we've got at most 3 budget cycles before the stuff hits the fan, so to speak, right? And we're at a level of our reserves that's unacceptable. I thought we had a very short window to deal with this. Now it looks like we have a lot more breathing room. However, I know you're shaking your head, and I agree with it. We're asking for a lot of things. We want a lot more things. We want more policing. We want parks in South Glendale. We want more permit staff. We want so many other things, right? And it's not just we want them, the public wants them. And so I think that we need to have a full and honest discussion about what we can afford. And if there are going to be no new revenues, if we're taking all these revenue options off the table, then we have to be honest about the fact that we're not going to be able to afford them. Now, what I would like to see is if we could get, and this is not for next week, but a longer-term forecast, like a 10, 12-year budget forecast to take us through to that peak of the pension obligations that I guess is forecasted for the mid-2030s, right? What do we need to do to put ourselves on a healthy financial foundation to carry us through the peak pension burden that we're going to face? Because I think it's very critical that we do that. So I would like to see that come back so we know where we are when we talk about all these new programs and we talk about revenues that we're apparently not willing to consider.
Right.
Sounds good.
All right. Any more comments? Thank you to staff. We're going to adjourn the meeting. 4:47 p.m. Oh, do I need can I get a?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Are we ready?
Yes, go ahead.
Welcome to the regular meeting of the May 21st meeting of the Glendale City Council. Call to order at 4:48 p.m. May we have roll call?
Council members Brotman,
Here.
Garpetian,
Here.
Kasakian,
Here.
Najarian,
Here.
Mayor Asatryan.
Here. May we have your report?
The closed session items are the following: A, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, initiation of litigation pursuant to paragraph 4 of subdivision D of Government Code Section 54956.9. B, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to paragraphs D2 and E3 of Government Code Section 54956.9. C, conference with real property negotiators, city designated negotiator Bradley Calvert, negotiating party, Trader Joe's Property, 2448 to 2460 Honolulu Avenue. Instructions to the negotiators will concern the price and terms of payment for the sale of city-owned property. D, public employee performance evaluation, city attorney. E, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, Galayan et al., City versus City of Glendale, LASC case number 23GDCV01871. F, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to paragraphs D2 and E2 of Government Code Section 54956.9.
Do we anticipate reporting out on any of that?
Madam Mayor, we anticipate reporting on item 1B, and I would note for the record on item 1F, the facts and circumstances giving rise to potential litigation arise from the mayoral selection process on April 2nd, 2024.
Thank you.
And I'm recusing myself from that.
Right, and then we're going to recess to closed session.